All right, I'm going to read Psalms chapter 15, starting in verse 1. That is Psalms chapter 15, a psalm of David. O Lord, who shall sojourn in your tent? Who shall dwell on your holy hill? He who walks blamelessly and does what is right and speaks truth in his heart, who does not slander with his tongue and does no evil to his neighbor, nor takes up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but who honors those who fear the Lord, who swears to his own hurt and does not change, who does not put out his money at interest and does not take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things shall never be moved. That is the holy, inspired, and inerrant word of God. Grace and peace to the body. I want to thank everybody who is listening live, those who will tune in later, and those who will listen to it after it's recorded. I appreciate your time, and it is. I know that everybody's time is precious, so I definitely do appreciate that. Now, with that being said, this is part two in our discussion with Ulrich on Daniel chapter 8. And for those who do not know, Ulrich is holding to the SDA position of the book of Daniel. And my focus will be primarily on the 2300 in Daniel chapter 8, but we will be looking at other stuff in the book of Daniel. So with that being said, Ulrich, welcome to the channel.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, it's. I'm glad to be here again, so that we can kind of talk more. Because last time we couldn't talk a lot because my Wi-Fi and the sound and everything was really poor. So, yeah, now I'm at home. Definitely at home. It's 11 o'clock at night, so I
Awesome.
hope I'm home. But yes, no. There's a few things I want to talk about before we get into Daniel 8 with the 2300 days, because I think this is relevant. Some people don't believe it's relevant, but I believe it's completely relevant because of Daniel as a book of not only history but also prophecy. Daniel is mostly prophecy, but has also elements of history as well. But um, now the thing is, why is it important that Daniel even receives this prophecy or these prophecies in the first place? And it has to do with the not necessarily salvation in the sense of spiritual salvation, but more of like physical liberation from their captors, because they've been slaves or kind of conquered for since Babylon until to basically Greece. And so like Daniel in chapter 2 doesn't even receive this dream. This is from Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar received the dream of the statue, which is very interesting because Nebuchadnezzar didn't even know what the dream was about. He didn't even remember it. And remember how he went through and he was like, "Okay, I'm going to kill everybody because you guys can't tell me what the prophecy is or what I was dreaming." And so Daniel's like, "No, no, no, wait. Just give me a second. Let me go fix this and let me go pray to God and I'm going to tell you the answer." So he does that. Now, this is a dream during the, what does it say, the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, when the Bible is talking about time, for example, in history, let's say King Belshazzar, he reigned for 2 years, but in the Bible it says in his third year, which was most likely his final year of being king, and right after that was the beginning of the first year of, I think, King Darius. Or was it Cyrus? It was one of them because they're both kings from Media, Persia. But here we're talking about the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar reigned for about 23 years. 7 of those years he went crazy, insane. It was something that God was trying to humble Nebuchadnezzar into believing in who the true God is. I mean, he did that with a lot of kings. And, some people believed, it's possible that Nebuchadnezzar became a believer in God because he recognizes that God is the highest God above all. And you can notice that because the worship of God was more prevalent in Babylon from Daniel and his people. And that's why King Belshazzar, rebelled against it, because like he literally took the cups and stuff from like temple and was drinking from it. So he was defiling the cups and the plates of the temple and stuff like that. Now, um, here it says in Daniel 2:31, it actually talks about what he sees. And it says in 30, like, as for me, this mystery was revealed to me not because I possess more wisdom. He's now giving more knowledge to God than he is himself, because Nebuchadnezzar wants to give him everything. But Daniel says, no, it's not because I possess the wisdom than any other living person, but so that the king may understand the interpretation and comprehend the thoughts of your mind. Now, I'm reading the New English translation. I did this because King James Version has a lot of complicated language in it, so I thought this would be a little bit easier for people watching. So if you guys are wondering where I'm reading from, it's the New English translation. I don't use it a lot. This is my first time using it because I was trying to understand what's being said, right? And so, like 31, we go into it and it says, "You, O king, were watching as a great statue." So this great statue, if we're talking about the great statue, let me see if I can present. It looks like this, and I don't think anybody can disagree with this. Is because everybody knows, because it's translated. Let me see if I can find it. It's translated as this. I think it's this one. Let me see that one, or well, I like this one more because it's not so complicated. So this is basically what the statue is, right? This is what you can imagine of the statue from Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So you have all these layers, all these different metals that are described in it. Now it goes on and says, of impressive size and extraordinary brightness was standing before you. Its appearance caused alarm. As for that statue, its head was fine gold. So we have the statue of the fine gold. Nebuchadnezzar, this is the first part. And then it continues, and its chest and arms were silver, its belly and thighs were bronze. Now, like it says, you get the arms right here, silver, and then the thigh of brass, right? Bronze, basically. And then it says its legs were of iron, its feet were partly of iron and partly of clay. So look here, iron, and then you can see the feet, partly iron, partly clay. You guys can just ignore the picture. I just found the picture for just reference. So I mean, like, don't get mad at me for all the stuff on it. But and it says, you were watching as a stone was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its iron and clay feet, breaking them in pieces. Then the iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold were broken in pieces without distinction and became like chaff from the summer threshing floor that the wind carries away. Not a trace of them could be found, but the stone that struck the statue became a large mountain that filled the entire earth. This was a dream. Now we will set forth before the king its interpretation. So Daniel says in 37, you, O king, are the king of kings. So, I mean, we all know that God also carries on this title, King of Kings, but he was also saying this about Nebuchadnezzar because God placed him as the highest authority on earth, basically, is what he's saying, because it says the God of heaven has granted you sovereignty, power, strength, and honor. But Nebuchadnezzar took it as he must be God himself. No, more like God gave him the power and he took it too far, right? So it says, wherever human beings, wild animals, and birds of the sky live, he has given them into your power. He has given you authority over them all. You are the head of gold. Now after you, another kingdom will rise, one inferior to yours. Then a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule in all the earth. Then there will be a fourth kingdom. And when it says rule in all the earth, basically it's saying like in the known earth. It wasn't saying like it conquered South America or America as we know today, you know? It's not talking about that. It's talking about the known kingdoms, right? So, I mean, like, of course, those kingdoms didn't exist, right? So it says, right, will rise, one inferior to yours. Then one third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule in all the earth. Then there'll be a fourth kingdom, one strong like iron, just like iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And as iron breaks in pieces, all these metals, so break in pieces and crush the others. in that you are seeing feet and toes, partly of wet clay and partly of iron. So this will be a divided kingdom, because it says some of the strength of iron will be in it, for you saw iron mixed with wet clay, in that the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay. The latter stage of the kingdom would be partly strong and partly fragile, because they can't mix, because you can't mix iron with clay, right? It doesn't work. It says, and in that you saw iron mixed with wet clay, so people will be mixed with one another without adhering to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. In the day of those kings, the God of heaven will raise up an everlasting kingdom that will not be destroyed, and a kingdom that will not be left to another people. It will break in pieces and bring about the demise of these kingdoms, but it will stand forever. You saw that the stone was cut out from a mountain, but not by human hands. It smashed the iron, bronze, clay, silver, and gold into pieces. The great God has made known to the king what will occur in the future. The dream is certain, and his interpretation is reliable. So the stone that is talking about, that's made, not cut out by human means, is the kingdom of God, because it's a stone was cut out with hands, which struck the image, and it became a mountain. And this is the final kingdom. Okay, so this final kingdom is Jesus. So this prophecy here in 2 is the whole prophecy from Daniel to the kingdom of God, when God will come back and set his kingdom upon the earth, right? So it's important because it's all about salvation. It's all about hope, and how the Messiah will come and save the people. They literally believed that this kingdom would have been the Messiah. And that's why the apostles, for example, were so confused when Jesus said, "No, I'm going to die. Like I'm going to be crucified. Like my body's going to break." And they're like, "How's that possible, Jesus? Like you're the Messiah. You're going to be here. You're going to destroy Rome." So I mean, the prophecy, they interpreted it as a militant or militant, or a government on earth physically when Jesus came. They thought he was okay, he'll be here. So that's what they believed the whole time. They didn't completely understand the prophecy in 2, but that's the general prophecy of the kingdoms, right? Now we have to go to 7. 7 is connected to 2 because it talks about the kingdoms, okay? It talks about the 4 kingdoms. And the reason why Daniel receives this is because the prophecy from Daniel 2 is not complete. It's not the only thing he needs to know, right? Because it's not just 4 kingdoms and then a 5th kingdom. No. This one he receives in the first year of King Belshazzar. Belshazzar in the Bible is known as the son of Nebuchadnezzar, but he wasn't really. He was the son of one of his successors. He actually ruled 23 years after, basically, Nebuchadnezzar. So this is the first year. This is still in the time of Babylon. Now, if you guys know, hopefully you guys know, this is history. Babylon was between the 6th century and the 7th century, 6th century. Daniel lived during about the 6th. They say a lot of scholars, biblical scholars, state that the book of Daniel was written between 6 BCE, the 6th century BCE, and 2nd BCE. Why is that important? Because depending on where you place the book of Daniel is where you will place the prophecy. That's what I'm saying. So it says in the first year of King Belshazzar. Remember that Belshazzar only ruled literally for 2 years. But in the chapter 8, it refers to it as the 3rd year. Yeah, I mean, it refers to him in the 3rd year of chapter 8. But 7 is the first year. So basically, this is the beginning of Belshazzar's reign. And now it says, in the first year, in chapter 7, it says, in the first year of King Belshazzar of Babylon, Daniel had a dream filled with visions while he was laying on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream in a summary fashion. Daniel explained, I was watching my vision during the night as the 4 winds of the sky. Normally in prophecy, winds, it's understood as kingdoms, I mean, that's somehow prophecy could be understood as a symbol. It's not literally for winds. It's a vision he's having. And it says, we're
Now,
storing up the Great Sea. Then
real
4
quick,
large...
Ulrich, real quick.
Huh?
Is this
Yeah.
where you're going to be tying this into chapter 8?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
All right.
So it says, then 4 large beasts came up from the sea. They're different from another. Now, prophecy is symbolic, unless it's a literal prophecy, like Jesus, not Jesus, but God talking to Jonah and saying, "Hey, you need to go to Nineveh and tell them that if they don't repent, they're gonna die." That wasn't symbolic. That was a conditional prophecy because God doesn't destroy Nineveh because they repent, right? So that prophecy was not symbolic. But a lot of prophecy, especially apocalyptic prophecy, which is Daniel and Revelations, it's apocalyptic. It's symbolic. It represents something greater. So I mean, a lot of things in there is symbolic in Revelations, for example. But like the seven churches can be taken both literal and symbolic. But that's another topic. But it says, then the four beasts, large beasts, came up from the sea. They were different from another. And the first one was like a lion with eagle's wings. As I watched, its wings were pulled off and it was lifted up from the ground. It was made to stand on 2 feet like a human being and a human mind was given to it. The second a beast appeared like a bear. It was raised up on one side and there were 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, get up and devour much flesh. And it says, after these things, as I was watching, another beast, like a leopard, appeared with 4 bird-like wings on its back. This beast had 4 heads, and ruling authority was given to it. After these things, as I was watching the night visions, a 4th beast appeared, one dreadful, terrible, and very strong. It had 2 large rows of iron teeth. It devoured and crushed, and anything that was left, it trampled with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that came before it, and it had 10 horns. As I was contemplating the horns, another horn, a small one, came up between them, and 3 of the former horns were torn out by the roots to make room for it. This horn had eyes resembling human eyes, and a mouth speaking arrogant things, or blasphemous things, as they say. While I was watching, thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His attire was white like snow. The hair of his head was like lamb's wool. His throne was ablaze with fire, and its wheel wore flame. A river of fire was streaming forth and proceeding from his presence. Many thousands were ministering to him. Many tens of thousands stood ready to serve him. The court convened and the books were opened. The books would be considered maybe the book of life because it talks about the book of life, the books that will be open as the Revelation says, men will be judged. Angels and men will be judged. Books were open. And 11 says, then I kept on watching because of the arrogant words of the horn that was speaking. I was watching until the beast was killed and his body destroyed and thrown into the flaming fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their ruling authority had already been removed, though they were permitted to go on living for a time and a season. Now this is where it gets interesting. It says in 13 and 14, I was watching the night visions, and with the clouds of the sky, one like a son of man was approaching. He went up to this Ancient of Days and was escorted before him. To him was given ruling authority, honor, and sovereignty. All peoples, nations, tongues, languages, groups were serving him. His authority is eternal, will not pass away. His kingdom will not be destroyed. This is Jesus. And this kingdom is the same kingdom that was represented in chapter 2 in the last part of it, talking about the storm. It says, as for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed, and the visions of my mind were alarming me. I approached one of these standing nearby and asked him about the meaning of all this. So he spoke with me and revealed to me the interpretation of the vision. These large beasts, which are 4 in number, represent 4 kings who will rise from earth. The holy ones. I'm reading Bible Gateway, so I'm not reading anything that's Adventist, guys. So I want you guys to understand the commentary for the holy ones are represented as angels. That's what the translation is saying here in this commentary. It says, of the Most High will receive the kingdom and take possession of the kingdom forever and ever. So it's saying that the holy ones or the angels will receive and guide humans and take possession of the kingdom, right? That's basically what it's saying. And then I wanted to know the meaning of the 4th beast. So Daniel was so confused because of the little horn. This is why he says, I want to know the meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others. It was dreadful with 2 rows of iron teeth and bronze claws, and it devoured, crushed, and trampled anything that was left with its feet. I also want to know the meaning of the 10 horns on its head, and of that other horn that came up and before, which 3 others fell. This was the horn that had eyes and a mouth speaking arrogant things, whose appearance was more formal than the others. When I was watching, that horn began to wage war against the holy ones and was defeating them until the Ancient Days arrived and judgment was rendered in favor of the holy ones of the Most High. And the time came for the holy ones to take the possession of the kingdom. This is what he told me. The 4th beast means that there will be a 4th kingdom on earth that will differ from all the other kingdoms. It will devour all the earth. It will trample and crush it. The 10 horns means that 10 kings will rise from the kingdom. Another king will rise after them, but he will be different from the other ones. He will humiliate 3 kings. He will speak words against the Most High. He will harass the holy ones of the Most High continually. His intention will be to change times established by law, or change times and law, which is translated in other versions. In King James Version, it says the law. The holy ones will be delivered into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. For a time, times, and half a time is the same thing that says in Daniel 8. It says, but the court will convene, and his ruling authority will be removed, destroyed, and abolished forever. Then the kingdom, authority, and greatness of the kingdoms of the whole heaven will be delivered to the people of the holy ones of the Most High. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. All authorities will serve him and obey him. This is the conclusion of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts troubled me greatly, and the color drained my face, but I kept the matter to myself. Now, there's a few things from the commentary here I'm going to read because I think it's important, especially the context of what all this is saying, right? So if we go down to, let me see if I can, I'll show you in my computer. So, find it because there's a lot here. Okay, so Daniel 7:27 says the holy ones, and this translation says that they are angels, and they are probably refers to the angels as protectors of God's people. If the holy ones are God's people, then this is an oppositional construction, the people who are the holy one. So 8:24 also talks about this. I wanted to change it to King James Version to show you that, because in chapter 7 it actually says times, and half a time, which is literally 2300 days, mentioned in chapter 8 as well. And it says, so the characteristics we have here, yes, it says for a time, and half a time. And so this usually refers to 2300 days. The beast, the fourth beast, has it's like iron. So a lot of people believe that the fourth beast and the fourth kingdom from Daniel 2 are the same things because of the description of it, that it has iron, teeth of iron, it crushes. And so you can these are all symbolic beasts, as there are 4 kingdoms, right? So the 4 kingdoms come in succession, right? And the horn, the small horn, comes out between other kings, and it takes out 3 of them, gets rid of them. And the thing with the little horn is that it speaks blasphemous things or arrogant things, has eyes like a man. And so what it also does is, it not only does it speak things like that, it persecutes the saints, is what it says, So the holy ones, angels, or it could be us. So and not only did the little horn do that, persecute the holy ones, but it also tried to change. His intention was to change times and laws. It's change times established by laws. That's what it says in the English version. Now, when we go to 8, and this is where I can bring it in together, and it says, in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar. So the prophecy between the Daniel 7, Daniel 8 isn't a long period of time. It could be up to a year they received it, or it could be a little bit less than that, because in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar, he dies, because this is his last reign. He was destroyed by Media Persia. I mean, if you remember that Babylon was destroyed, it's actually I think it's in chapters 5, 6. Yes, I think before. So you have to go back, read that, how he dies, and it also talks about it. But it says, in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after one that had appeared to me previously. So this vision is after the one that came to him, because he didn't understand it. In this vision, I saw myself in Susa, the citadel, which is located in the province of Elam. In the vision, I saw myself at the Ulai Canal. I looked up and saw a ram with 2 horns standing at the canal. Its 2 horns were both long, but one was longer than the other. The longer one was coming up after the shorter one. I saw that the ram was budding westward, northward, and southward, which means like it's reaching outwards to other sides. It's not staying in one area. It says no animal was able to withstand it, or was able to stand before it, and there was none who can deliver from its power. It did as it pleased and acted arrogantly. So of course there's this other word arrogantly that's like stupid, blasphemous, whatever you want to say. While I was contemplating all this, a male goat. So there's two of them. There's there you have the ram, and then you have the goat. Yes, making sure I have it correct this time. It says, while I was contemplating all this, a male goat was coming from the west over the surface of all the land without touching the ground. This goat has a conspicuous horn between its eyes. I came to the two-horned ram that I had been standing beside the canal and rushed against it with raging strength. I saw it approaching the ram. It went into a fit of rage against the ram. It struck it and broke off its two horns. The two horns that it's representing, if we know the symbolism, the two horns, one was much longer than the other one. This ram represents Medo Persia, because Medo Persia, one kingdom was much stronger than the other one. So, I mean, they were both destroyed. And it also tells in Daniel 8 who the ram is. It's translated as this is Medo Persia. And then the next one, the male goat, is Greece, because it has only one horn, right? It's a unicorn. And it says, it says that I had seen standing beside the canal and rushed against it with raging strength. I saw it approaching the ram. It went into a fit of rage against the ram and struck it and broke off its two horns. The ram had no ability to resist it. The goat hurled the ram to the ground and trampled it. No one could deliver the ram from its power. The male goat acted even more arrogantly, but no sooner had the large horn become strong than it was broken, and there rose four conspicuous horns in its place, extending toward the four winds of the sky. Four winds of the sky is just kingdoms. It's extending towards those areas. For example, the Ptolemaic general, the Ptolemaic reign, the kingdom of him, which was in Egypt, was over in Egypt until the Seleucids conquered and destroyed it. But then after that came Rome. But this one is talking, I mean, we can translate this as, of course, we talked about it before, Alexander the Great, a great horn, right? And then four of them came out of that, which is historically proven, of course, to be four generals that took over the kingdom after he died, because he gave it to their hands. And so here is where we get into the most interesting part. It says, from one of them came a small horn. This small horn is similar to the small horn in the fourth beast, which spoke pompous words or blasphemous words or arrogant words. It says, but it grew to be very great toward the south and the east, toward the beautiful land, or the glorious land, is what we believe as the as Jerusalem, as the promised land, as the land that was where even we as Christians say, well, this is where God's people are, right? So this says beautiful land in English, but in King James Version it says the glorious land. It grows so great that it reached the army of heaven and brought about the fall of some of the army and some of the stars to the ground where it trampled them. It also acted arrogantly against the prince of the army, which is Jesus, or whoever you want to. Some people say it's Michael, okay, but mostly we think it's Jesus, and from whom the daily sacrifices were removed and whose sanctuary was thrown down. The army was given over along with the daily sacrifice in the course of his sinful rebellion. It hurled truth to the ground and enjoyed success. Then I heard a holy one, which is an angel, speaking. Another holy one said to the one who was speaking, to what period of time does the vision pertain? This vision pertained concerning the daily sacrifice and the destructive act of rebellion. So in King James Version, it says, I have in my Bible because I have the King James Version here. This is 13. So we go to 13. It says, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation? In the normal English version, it says the destructive act of rebellion, which I tried to explain the other day, which is rebellion, the destructive act of rebellion, and the giving over of both a sanctuary and an army to be trampled. He said to me, to 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be put right again. Now, this is interesting because it's the same thing that's spoken of in Daniel 7. If you don't believe me, look up what does time, and time, a half a time mean, and it comes up as 2,300 evenings and mornings. And so that's what it says, right? And so here he says an angel interprets Daniel's vision because he doesn't understand. So we're going to go down. Then he says, I'm going to inform you about what will happen in the latter time of wrath, for the vision pertains to the appointed time of the end. The ram that you saw with the two horns stands for the kings of Media and Persia. The male goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king, which was Alexander the Great. To the horn that was the horn that, the male goat is the king. Yeah, okay. So the horn that was broken, and in whose place there rose four other stands for four kingdoms that will rise from its nation. Four kingdoms did. The Ptolemaic, and then the other three, Deotic, general kings. And it says that they will not have his strength. They were not connected. They were not united as a one front. That's the great thing about Alexander the Great, was because he was strong with everybody, with all the power he had, but then he died so young. I don't know, from drinking or something. I can't remember. And it says, toward the end of the rule, when rebellious acts are complete, a rash and deceitful king will arise. His power will be great, but it will not be in his strength alone. He will cause terrible destruction. He will be successful in what he undertakes. He will destroy powerful people and the people of the holy ones. By his treachery, he will succeed through deceit. He will have an arrogant attitude, and he will destroy many who are unaware of his schemes. He will rise up against the prince of princes, God, yet he will be broken apart, but not by human agency. The vision of the evenings and morning that was told to you is correct, but you should still look vision, for it refers to a time many days from now. I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I got up again and carried out the king's business. I was astonished at the vision. There's no one to explain it. So if we go down here, and third, let's go down to here. This interprets Daniel verse 9 as Antiochus Epiphanes, which I don't believe is true because the time period is off. That's the thing. The time period is super off, and I'll tell you why. But after that, I'm going to show you a little bit more. People think the stars are associated to
Okay,
the
so
angelic members,
we'll stop
and
here
then
for a second, real quick.
okay, that's fine.
So, a couple things I like to interact with is, it seems like you were understanding here when it says in verse 1, in the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a
Uh-huh.
vision appeared to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. It seems like you're inserting into there that he did not understand the previous vision, and so that's why this vision appeared to him. But the text is not saying that. Where would you get
Mm,
that from?
no, I'm getting that from 7.
Where in 7 would you get that?
Okay, so he says here, this is the Daniel 7:28. It says,
Yeah,
"This is the conclusion of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts troubled me greatly, and the color drained from my face, but I kept the matter to myself."
right.
So the reason it says he was troubled because he didn't understand it, and it's the same thing he says in Daniel 8, at the end of Daniel 8 as well. He still says, "I don't understand." Like it was explained who the ram and the male goat was. And it says, I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. And I got up and again carried out the king's business, but I was astonished at the vision. There was no one to explain it. So this language explains that he didn't understand, or he had confusion about it because he was wondering about it. Because it says here, what does it say? Go living for a time was for me. Daniel 15 of 7:15. It says, "As for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed, and the vision of my mind were alarming me. I approached one of those standing nearby and asked him about the meaning of all this." So that's where I get it from. Is basically that language that explains that he was confused. His thoughts troubled him. I mean, like that's normal language to explain that it's basic grammar, you know.
Right,
And I
right.
mean, you get maybe you don't believe it. It's okay. That's not the important part of the vision. Honestly, I mean, that's not really something so great. Okay, continue.
So what? If you notice here in verse 15, he asks after he receives this vision with all these
Mhm.
symbols, right? All these animals, and you especially have this little horn,
Mhm.
and that's going to act wickedly and do all these things. So it's
Mhm.
obviously natural for him to be like, well, these things are concerning me, they're alarming me, I'm not fully
Mhm.
understanding these things, and that's why it goes in verse 16 onward to explain. The same thing happens
Of
in
course.
chapter 8, but I would
Mhm.
not then conclude from that then in chapter 8 that this chapter 8 is explaining all of chapter 7. I would not conclude from that, just because when he received the images, he was confused and alarmed, and then the Holy One went on to explain to him in verses 16 onward. I would say what it is separate visions that have different purposes. So Daniel chapter 8 has a certain purpose, and it was specifically or especially for the Jews going through the if you've read about what Antiochus did,
Mhm.
the absolutely heinous slaughtering thousands upon thousands of Jews, excuse me, for not allowing the Jews to practice any of their Sabbaths or any of their laws under the punishment of death, hanging little babies that would be circumcised on the eighth day. Like, he did absolutely wicked and horrible things, and so
Mhm.
it's a stretch to me, in my opinion, to say that the Jews would not receive any vision to help them with those times or encourage them through those times, to say, yes, you're going to go through these times. There will be those wicked Jews who will make covenant with Antiochus, but there are my faithful that are still there, and they will be faithful to me even unto death, and they will
Okay.
prosper in the end.
I understand what
Whereas
you're saying.
chapter 7 goes all the way through all the four beast systems, so I can see why that would be focused on the fourth beast, whereas chapter 8 is focused on the third beast system. And
That's
so
the thing.
what I would say is that what happened in the third beast system with Antiochus is a shadow of what was to happen in the fourth beast system, and then in the future, even to us right now.
Okay. Okay. So the problem with that is the fact that uh, Daniel 8 is talking about the second and third beast, not only the third beast, it's talking about the second and third beast. Antiochus came way after. Do you remember when Antiochus was about? Antiochus was about, see here, it tells us there.
175 BC, but he'd be considered
170.
part of the third beast.
No,
Yeah,
because how that is understood is that this one, it doesn't make any sense, is the problem. And the reason why it doesn't make any sense is because we got to figure out the 2300 days, right? The 2300 days
agreed.
is important in this aspect. Now, when Daniel was talking about all of this, when he had these visions, what year was it?
Sorry, what? Repeat that. Sorry, I was
When
reading.
Daniel was having these visions, what year was it?
From chapter 8,
Chapter 7 and chapter 8.
555
Hmm.
or 551. I forget the exact date.
Yeah, it's about that. It's about the 6th century BC. Now, the thing is, it talks about the 2300 days. Some people take that this can be literal, 2300 days. 2300 days is 6.5 years. 6.5 years from the time that Daniel wrote, well, not even Daniel, we don't even know. A lot of people believe, scholars believe that Daniel wasn't the only one who wrote Daniel. It could have been written in the 2nd century BC. We don't know. But I'm going to take it from the fact that he wrote it literally in the 6th century BC, and all of this comes afterwards, 400 years after, right? 200, well, not even that far. Okay, so if we want to take the prophecy, because we don't know when in chapter 7, 8, we don't know when the 2300 days begins. So let's say the 2300 days begins in the time of Daniel, during the last reign of Belshazzar, right? 6 years after that, the temple wasn't built. When was the temple rebuilt? It was 457 BC in the third, this is in Ezra, the third decree from Xerxes, who called the Jews or the Israelites to go out, to return, and to build their city and to build the temple. The first decree, they were able to build the walls, which is it's basically a city, but it's nothing. It couldn't be that because it talks about the rebuilding of the temple, right? So 457 BC is not 6 years after, 6.5 years after Daniel had the vision in 7 and 8. It's impossible. So either we can take it symbolically, or we can take it as prophetically as 2,300 years, right? So there's only three ways to interpret this: like literally, symbolically, or prophetically. Now we don't know what time it begins. Everybody says it's Antiochus, right? But Antiochus wasn't the only one persecuting the Jews. The Romans persecuted the Jews. I mean, like if you remember, Antiochus didn't even destroy the temple.
Yes, but
He only desecrated it. And even so, he desecrated, put a statue of Zeus in it, but that didn't stop the Jews from worshiping. What did the Maccabees do? The Maccabees came and waged war with him. And even so, Antiochus didn't even extend his kingdom all over the place. He tried to conquer. And Antiochus is from Syria, from the Middle East. And he extended to Egypt. And then I've even studied this from history. He extended to Egypt, beat Ptolemy, but he couldn't keep it. He couldn't retain the kingdom of Egypt because Rome came in and took it. He had to give it up. And Antiochus comes in. So the way that you're translating the 2,300 days is being symbolic and not literal or prophetic, which I don't think it's symbolic. It can't be symbolic because then prophecy cannot be uh, understood correctly. And that's why it's important to understand. I believe that the reason why the angel tells Daniel about the second and third kingdoms is because it's relevant to his time. Because after Belshazzar comes in meet in Persia, so if you go to 8, because we're 8 here, King Belshazzar, then you go to chapter 9, which is in Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, right? Darius was in the first year of him. He killed Belshazzar. He took over Babylon. He destroyed it. And so we enter the kingdom of Darius, of Medo Persia. And so like he's in that when we're talking about 9. And this is literally the same year that he gets the vision about the male goat and the ram. So what he's focusing on here is the second and third kingdoms because that's what's going to happen, right? And then the little horn comes out, and it's the same little horn that is, well, okay, if you guys don't take it seriously, from Daniel 7, it's a little horn that does the same thing that the little horn does and for the same time, okay? So Daniel 9 talks about it. It says, am I in Daniel 8? In Daniel 8, it talks about it too. But Daniel 8, it says, let's go to 9. From one of them came a small horn, but it grew to be very great toward the south and east and toward the beautiful land. It grew so great it reached the army of heaven and brought about the fall of some of the army and some of the stars to the ground, where it trampled them. It also acted arrogantly against the prince of the army, with whom the daily sacrifice was removed and whose sanctuary was thrown down. The sanctuary was not thrown down in Antiochus. It was only defiled. Now you can take this
hold on. What do you mean by thrown down? How
like
would you define that?
destroyed. The language can be changed to meaning destroyed. It can be walked over, destroyed completely. Let me see what the King James Version says. So let's go to the King James Version, because even though some people say the New King James Version is only eloquent language and it's just harder to understand, I mean, it's true. I mean, it's much harder. So it's in his sanctuary was cast down. What does the word cast down mean? Let's look. What does cast down mean? So cast down means depressed, downcast, unhappy, sad, miserable, gloomy, down. It could be literally like destroyed, demoralized, crushed, crestfallen, oppressed, wretched, undermined, desolate, which means destroyed also. So I mean, it could be taken in many ways. So I mean, however you want to take it, fine. I mean, that doesn't really bother me. But it means that here It was cast down, and it wasn't, and Antiochus wasn't the only one who did that.
Correct.
Literally,
Correct. I
Rome
agree.
destroyed it, and today they don't have it. Now, let's say the prophecy of the 2300 days is literal, like not literal, like prophetic, not symbolic but prophetic, and it starts from Daniel's time. 2300 years after after the when it starts at the prophecy of 7, 8, and 9, couldn't be possible at that time because the sanctuary was not even built. I mean, like, it was destroyed in 70 BC. Oh no, AC AD, after the Jesus. Thinking of Spanish. Anyways, so it can't be starting at the time of 7 and 8. It's impossible. So when does it start? Now, the importance of knowing when it starts, of course, is the major part of the prophecy, because Daniel doesn't understand it. He still doesn't understand this little horn, this horn that is trampling over the over the of the sanctuary. It says it was acted arrogantly against the prince of the army, which Rome has done against God. It has destroyed the daily sacrifices, was removed. The daily sacrifices was not removed for a long time with Antiochus, but it was removed for a long time by the Roman Empire because it was destroyed and they haven't rebuilt it since then. It's been thousands of years and it hasn't been rebuilt, right? And it says, it hurled truth to the ground and enjoyed success. Then I heard a holy one speaking. Another holy one said to the one who was speaking, "To what period does this does this vision pertain?" Vision containing the daily sacrifice and the destructive act of rebellion and the giving over of both the sanctuary and the army to be trampled. He has said to me, "To 2300 evenings and mornings, and the sanctuary will be put right again." The sanctuary still hasn't been put right again. The earthly sanctuary, in the sense, hasn't been. We can't, because it's not going to get built again. The Jews want to build it again. They're waiting for the third temple because they take this prophecy literally. Like, they think, okay, Jesus isn't the Messiah. The temple is going to be rebuilt again, and so even Christians are waiting for it. I don't even know why Christians are waiting for the third temple, because when Jesus came, he did the end of sacrifice and ceremonies. Like, the whole reason why the temple was built was to do what? Do sacrifices. That's why they can't do sacrifices. That it was built for that reason. I mean, the sanctuary in the wilderness was built literally to do sacrifices. It wasn't for the people to go in and worship. They couldn't go in because they were sinful. Only the priest and the high priest can go in. And in the sanctuary, the same thing. They couldn't go in. They could sacrifice their bulls, their goats, their rams, and everything in the atrium, but they couldn't go inside because it was forbidden to go inside. And there's been different sanctuaries on earth, literally. Garden of Eden, sanctuary. The temple in the wilderness, sanctuary. Temple of Solomon, sanctuary. The rebuilt temple, sanctuary. The heavenly sanctuary, which is in literally Hebrews, and it's also in the part where God tells Moses to build it. And then the other sanctuary, which is our bodies. There's many sanctuaries, but there's a reason why, because God dwells in there. And so nobody went in there and just worshiped. No, they didn't just go in there when they did. They had synagogues for that. The temple was built specifically for sacrifices.
Right,
And
right. I
so
don't I don't disagree with that. I'm
I'm
not I'm
glad.
not I'm not disagreeing with that.
Okay.
In the new covenant, our bodies is the temple.
Yes.
I would say the sanctuary in the Old Testament, its main purpose was to house the special presence of the Lord, and that's
Yes.
typified by our bodies in the New Testament. God
You're
dwelling us.
correct. So
But
this is mhm.
so for the 2300 though, we don't need to guess about where
I
we
no,
need
I'm
to
not saying that
start
we
it.
need to guess. I'm not saying we need to guess. I'm saying that we need to find out, because the story of the 2300 days is what begins everything. Because
Right.
the whole reason why Daniel wanted to understand was because of that. Because he's like, okay, I'm captive. I have to do what all these kingdoms are saying. He was literally captive. I mean, it was much easier with Darius and Cyrus. They were much easier on the Jews and the Greeks as well. The Greeks were actually very kind with them, not very terrible with them. They were able to do what they wanted. They respected their religion, right?
which is actually an interesting point. If you read,
Mhm.
for example, the Seleucid Empire, all the
Mhm.
Seleucid kings were gracious to the Jews. All of
Mhm.
them allowed a plethora of beliefs and practices within their kingdom. It was
Mhm.
only Antiochus the Fourth, and
Mhm.
historians have no clue why. They speculate, but they actually don't know why he was so tyrannical and evil towards the Jews only, with respect to their religion.
They're crazy,
He
huh?
he did not allow them to practice their religion at all. He would slaughter the mothers. He would hang the mothers and the infant children who were circumcised according to their law. He
They're
would
crazy.
kill anyone who would any Jew who would practice any Sabbath, whether weekly or
Mhm.
yearly Sabbath, any
Yeah.
sacrifices. So
Yeah.
he did not allow them to. And it's an enigma to these historians. They have no clue why he was like that. The
Mhm.
only thing they really say is that he was possibly trying to get them to be more Hellenized.
Yeah, no, that's what I've heard too. I read it too. It says that he wanted to kind of convert them the the ideas that they shared. Really don't know why. I mean, like, oh my goodness, it was crazy, you know?
But here, so for the 2300, and since we're in hindsight, we can kind of figure this out, at least to a certain extent, right? It says for 2300, it is concerning the taking away of the regular burnt offering, the
Mhm.
transgression that makes desolate, the giving over the host and the sanctuary to be trampled underfoot. That is what the 2300 is concerning. So we have to look back
Mhm.
in history and see what does that apply to.
There you go. But the problem is that it's not physical. It's spiritual. Because think about this. Remember that Jesus says that the Bible says that we don't wage war against blood and flesh. We wage war against spirituality and principalities. No. And so the whole idea is that the Jews didn't even understand this prophecy. Even the disciples were like, okay, like I told you before, that Jesus says, I'm going to die. And they're like, no, you're not. You're going to destroy Rome. They took literally Daniel and other prophecies to mean that it was going to be a new kingdom, or Rome was not going to imprison them, enslave them, or anything like that. They took it as that. And that's what people are doing. They're taking it like physically out of something that's happening. And it can't, because the temple is done away with. Like the earthly sanctuary is gone. We don't need it because we don't have sacrifices or anything like that. And now, and the fact that we keep focusing on this sanctuary that is physical means that we're still trapped in this idea that the Jews are going to come back. They're going to be a special people once again. No, because Jesus says that the Jews and Gentiles, there's no difference between them. Like, we are spiritually grafted into the family of God, into the family of Abraham and God. So therefore, we are spiritual Jews, which is what it basically infers. And so therefore, the whole idea is spirituality and not necessarily physical. Now, the whole reason for the 2300 days, if it wasn't important, he wouldn't have told him. That's the whole point about the prophecy. It wouldn't have, it's important because it pertains to the sanctuary, to the cleansing of the sanctuary. Now, if we took it literally as 2300 days, it was impossible. Now, if we take it prophetically 2300 years, 2300 years have already passed, and the sanctuary is still not cleansed. It's still not rebuilt. And so therefore it cannot be physical. It has to be spiritual, and it must be talking about the temple in heaven, which is the throne of God. Because Christ, as our sacrifice, if we follow the sanctuary message, and the because the God and the angels and Jesus all were using sanctuary typography
Okay, so
to
we'll
uh-huh.
go with that. We'll say
Okay.
it's spiritual, referring to the what you just referred to, the heavenly
Okay.
sanctuary and all that. When did the taking away of the regular, the transgression makes desolate, and the giving over the sanctuary and the host be trampled underfoot? When
In
did that
1314.
start in the heavenly?
In
Because
the
that is what the
heavenly.
2300 is. That's when it starts. That's when the 2300 starts. Is when that is all taken away and
Good
trampled
job. Yeah.
underfoot.
Now that's my point. My point is this. It starts, that's why I always told you in 9, but you guys don't accept it as another translation or another interpretation or another understanding of what he wanted to say. And so, like, the 70 weeks is the start of that, because it says, um, 70 weeks have been determined concerning your people and your holy city. 70 weeks. How many days is in a week? 7. 7 times 70 is 490. This prophecy is messianic. So it says, from the rebuilding of the temple. Yes, from the rebuilding of the temple. It um, says so here. 70 weeks have been determined concerning your people and your holy city, to put an end to rebellion, to bring sin to completion, to atone for iniquity, to bring in perpetual righteousness, to seal up the prophetic vision, and to anoint a most holy place. So now, so know and understand, from the issuing of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem unto an anointed one, a prince arrives. There'll be a period of 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will again be built with plaza and moat, but in distressful times. Now, after the 62 weeks, an anointed one will be cut off and have nothing. As for the city and the sanctuary, the people of the coming prince will destroy them. So it says, as anointed one will be cut off and have nothing. Jesus was cut off and had nothing. As for the city and the sanctuary, the people of the coming prince will destroy them. But his end will come speedily like a flood. Until the end of the war that has been decreed, there will be destruction. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. Jesus did that. It wasn't 1 week, it was 3.5 years, because 1 week is, let's say 1 week is a prophetic week. So 7 days, 7 years. Jesus did that. 3.5 years was his ministry. He died in the middle of the week. The other last 3.5 years was the end was at Stephen's stoning. But in the middle of that week, he will bring sacrifices and offerings to a halt, meaning that there is no sacrifices and offerings. If the third temple was built, if the temple in Israel was built again, that means the sacrifices and offerings are not done away with. That's the reason why God hasn't allowed it to be rebuilt, because there's no reason for it. He hasn't called the Jews to rebuild it. If he did, it would have been rebuilt like right after Rome died off. Because what happened? Rome, that's the prophecy that we have to go into about the fourth beast, because that's even much stronger. And it says, on the wing of abominations will come one who destroys, until the creed is poured out on the one who destroys. Now, what the idea is that the 70-week prophecy is the start of the 2300 days. You take 490 days out of 2300 and you get 1844. What I believe, and not only the Adventists, this is an idea that we get biblically. This isn't from Ellen White. This isn't from Miller. This is from study. This is from people who came together and studied it. And what the study says, or even what I've understood from the study and what I've studied myself, it's not something I'm just making up, is that in 1844, because the ministry of Jesus was not finished, because if we talk about the typology of the sanctuary, there's three departments of the sanctuary. You have the atrium, which is the sacrifice. You have the holy place, which is when he spreads the blood of the lamb over it for our sins. He does that for the sacrifices. And then the most holy place is what houses God, right? Houses the Ark of the Covenant, which God, the seat of God, right? And then you have the high priest in Yom Kippur. I was saying the other day, is that when the high priest, only the high priest can go in and cleanse it of the blood, like literally cleanse it, like to get rid of the transgression of sin, the rebellion, to get rid of it, to make it pure again, to make it holy again, cleansed. And so this typology, the sanctuary was used as, like I said, the didactic tool to teach the Jews about salvation and about Jesus. But they didn't understand that. They didn't understand the didactic tool used by God. And so they continue doing sacrifice. Now today, the Jews don't do sacrifice. They can't. They don't have a temple to do it. And so Jesus is using this typology to help us understand what is going on in the plan of salvation. Jesus sacrificed. And then
Okay,
you have
so here's the issue with
Mhm.
starting the 2300 with the 490 at the same starting point. Notice here that the starting point is what is when the restoration of Jerusalem, which
Mhm.
includes the sanctuary, starts. The
Mhm.
2300 starts when the taking away of the daily and the trampling of the sanctuary happens. They cannot be the same starting point. You can't have both those things happening at the same time.
Let's see what it says. 13 and 14, it says, Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another one holy one saying, that certain one who was speaking, How long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? It's not saying that the beginning of the 2300 days is the trampling of this. It's saying that's when it ends. Because it says, I think it says that. It says,
It's saying both, not one, either or,
How
but it's
long
saying
will the
both.
vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? Has said to me, For 2,300 days, and the sanctuary shall be cleansed. It doesn't exactly tell you when it starts. It says that when it ends. Okay, it says when it ends, when the sanctuary is cleansed. The main focus is
So
the cleansing of the
what's
sanctuary,
happening
not the
within the
desolation.
so what's happening within the 2300 evenings and mornings? It's what's in verse 13. Then the
Mm-hmm.
conclusion of those is the restoration of the sanctuary to its rightful
Yes.
place. But that's not it's not excluding what's happening within those 2300s, which is the regular burnt offering being taken away, the trampling of the sanctuary and the host. That
Yes,
is what's happening within the 2300, and it's all of the 2300.
but it's just talking about when is it concerning it. That doesn't say that's when it ends or when it begins.
For
It
how
just talks
long
about yes, for how long. And it says for
is
2,300 days and then the sanctuary will be cleansed, but it does not
exactly.
say that the trampling of all this stuff is going to happen. That's not where it begins. It doesn't say that.
That is
It's a
what it
trick in the
says.
language. No, it
It's
doesn't,
exactly what it
because then
says.
it says, then I heard, no, because listen to the English. It says, then I heard a holy one speaking. Another one, holy one, said to the one who was speaking, to what period of time does the vision pertain? The vision, this vision containing the daily sacrifices. It's saying the vision,
Right.
not the beginning of the vision. How long does it pertain? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the destructive act of rebellion. That doesn't mean that it starts with the daily sacrifice and the destructive act of rebellion. No, it says that when it ends is at the cleansing of the sanctuary, but it does not say when it begins. That's the problem,
So I'll
and that's why we have to start with 9,
I'll
and
use
that's what
it.
I'm trying to tell you.
Right. I understand your position, but I'll use this example to explain what I'm saying. If I was to say, and I use this a couple times, Ulrich, for how long will it take you to travel to my home? And then
Yes.
you say, for 60 minutes, and then I will be at your place. That 60 minutes is all of that travel time. And the conclusion of that travel time is you being at my place. That's exactly what verse 13 and 14 are saying.
But that's not how it's being used. That's the problem.
It
It's the
is.
language of the Hebrew. Now look, what it's saying is how the concerning the daily sacrifice. It doesn't say when it starts. It doesn't say when it's traveling. It doesn't say anything like that. It's basic language. The reason I know this, one, I studied Greek and Hebrew. I studied English and Spanish. That means that I like language. When you study how language is, it changes. Like it doesn't always how we apply it. Because remember that the Bible was being translated from Hebrew to English or to Spanish or to other languages. So the language that it's being translated to is saying this because that's how they understood it. But that's not how it's being read, because it says, Another holy one said to the one who was speaking, To what period of time does the vision pertain? Meaning that it pertains. And then it says, you could put a comma there. It's like, it's a relative statement. It's like something you can get rid of or you can keep it in there. With the vision, what is it talking about? The vision pertain, saying the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the destructive act of rebellion. It's not saying that this is when does the vision pertain to when it starts to when it ends. No, it's saying that the vision, it's talking about the vision it's concerning. So it's saying the vision that I've been trying to tell you this whole time, it pertains to 2300 evenings and mornings. So it's not saying when it starts, and that's what you're getting caught up on. But you have to understand the language. Like it's not saying that. It's saying the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the destructive act of rebellion. Because if you don't understand when the 2300 days are starting and ending, that's the point. That's what you have to figure out. Because it could start tomorrow if we're taking it how you're understanding it. It can start tomorrow.
No,
It
not
can it
no.
could
No, not at
Yes,
all.
that's how
No.
you're understanding it, and that's how
No,
I can perceive it from
because
you, because That's what you're saying. That's
No,
what you're saying,
no.
because you're
What?
saying that it's not important to understand because it pertains to this. So it must have started at Antiochus. But if it started at Antiochus, it's still not a good time either.
It is a
Because
perfect time. It fits. It fits
no, it's not a
perfectly.
perfect time.
Yes.
Because what's going to happen if it passes? Because Antiochus lived how many years before? 100 something years before Jesus. So
Right.
if we're talking about this and it ends there, it doesn't make any sense because that's not what the vision is saying. It's not saying that. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I mean, like, I don't know if anybody understands this, but when you study something and people discredit you because they don't believe what you're saying, is because they don't understand it themselves. The vision,
Sometimes, yeah.
no, all times, because that's how it works. Because
I
like when you don't understand
but I
something,
understand what you're saying. I understand your position.
no,
I'm
I
just
don't think you
disagreeing
do.
with it.
I don't think you do
Right.
because
You're
what
saying
you're
you're saying
doing.
what you're saying is the Kazon is the whole thing, starting with Medo Persia. I'm disagreeing with that.
No, I'm not saying it starts with Media Persia.
The
I'm
2300
not
does
saying
not
that.
start with Medo Persia.
I'm saying it starts at 457 BC. It
Right.
starts
That's
at
during
the
the
end of
reign.
Media Persia in Greece.
Right. Well, that's what I mean when I say Medo Persia.
Yeah,
That's exactly what I'm saying.
and
Is
that's
that
the
in
thing. It
457 BC?
starts
That's
at the
during the Second
rebuilding.
Peace Kingdom.
Yes, and it starts at the rebuilding of the temple with the 490 years,
Right.
prophetic years, as I told you, because for God to send the message to Daniel, say the 2300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be cleansed. But not to have a starting period is too complicated for us to guess. What you're interpreting is different to what I'm interpreting. How do we know which is true? Because he wasn't the only one who persecuted the Jews. The Rome persecuted the Jews. Hitler persecuted the Jews. We could start at the time of Hitler if we wanted, but it has no point to say Antiochus. No, nothing. It doesn't have point because he persecuted Jews. He did this, but his reign wasn't all over the world. The main purpose of this is that the little horn grows out to all the four winds of the sky, which is all the kingdoms of the earth. Antiochus did not conquer all the nations of the world.
No,
No, Rome did.
what it says, it goes exceedingly great towards the south and
Yes.
the east.
East, south, and east.
Antiochus did both of those, but the main
Rome did
focus.
too.
Right.
And
I
Rome
don't
did
disagree with
too.
that. I'm not disagreeing with that.
But you are disagreeing it
I'm not
because you're saying
saying
it's
that.
Antiochus focusing on that for the 2300 days.
I'm not saying that because Antiochus did this, therefore Rome could not have done that. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is this vision here is concerning the activity of Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth, because he did do that. And then also here in verses 10 and 11, what does it say? It focuses mainly on the growing great towards the glorious land and God's people. That is the main
Mhm.
focus of this. It is not
Yes, it's the
towards
main
the
focus.
east and the south.
But it says four winds of the sky. So it says that the four conspicuous horns in its place, extending toward the four winds of the sky. From one of them came a small horn, but it grew to be very great toward the south and the east toward the beautiful land.
Right.
But
So the four
Antiochus could
horns.
not conquer all nations. He wasn't able to. He wasn't able to conquer Egypt, for example. He defeated Ptolemy, but he wasn't able
Right.
to conquer it. So his kingdom stopped because Rome came in, and then Rome
Right. Yes.
took it all in.
Yes, I agree.
So the
Well,
point here is
they
that
didn't take it in there, but
we have to understand the language of the vision, the language of what the angel is saying. It says, to what period of time does the vision pertain? It's kind of like saying, like, when Jesus was on the cross, he says, today you'll be in heaven. If you put the comma in a different place, it says, today I say you'll be in heaven. Doesn't mean that he'll be in heaven. It's taking the language in a different way, depending on where you put the punctuation, where you put the word, things like that. So it says, to what period does the vision pertain? This vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the destructive act, because the vision is concerning that, but doesn't say when does it start. He said to me, to 2,300 evenings and morning, then the sanctuary will be put right again. He focuses on the ending and not the beginning. Says the vision concerning doesn't mean that it's saying it's starting. Says that it ends with
it
the
doesn't have to
2,300
say it
evenings.
starts here. It doesn't have
Yes,
to
it
say
does.
no,
For it to
no,
be
no, no.
understood as that, yes.
No, it does not
Because
have to
that's how
say
the
that.
language is.
That's
Because
a
yes, because
presupposition.
No, it's not. Yours
presupposition.
is too, because you're saying the same thing about Antiochus, and that's when it began. You're saying the disposition of that is because
Not
he
not
does the
all
same.
time
He does.
not all time
He
prophecies say it has to use the word
It
start
doesn't
right
say
here.
has, but it gave us literally 2,300 evenings and mornings. The
Right.
point of that is very important. And that's why I say Daniel 9 is important to understanding when it begins, because we don't know when it begins. And that's why we need chapter 9. And it's
I
not just chapter 9, it's chapter 11 as well, because chapter 11 continues with the king of the south and the north. And so that's the problem. You're saying that it starts here, but that's speculation.
Not at all. It flows with the
Yes, it is
text very well.
speculation, because I
No, it's
could say
not.
the same thing about Hitler. Hitler, when it started,
No, Hitler
because he
didn't
did
do anything with the sanctuary, though. This has to
he
do with the
persecuted the
physical
Jews,
sanctuary.
but all he did was desecrate the sanctuary. And then the Maccabees came in and they fought with them and they
So
cleansed the sanctuary.
this vision here has to do with multiple things. It cannot refer to Hitler because Hitler only, I guess you could say, persecuted the Jews or trampled the Jews, and that's it. This vision
Yes.
has to do with more than that.
And I
And
can say the same thing with Antiochus,
the main focus of this is the regular, the daily. It's mentioned multiple times.
the daily sacrifice, but it was the Maccabees helped do what? Reinstitute that.
Exactly. Yes,
So
that's
it
when it
wasn't
was
like
restored to its
this is to
rightful
what
state.
period concerning the daily sacrifice and destructive act of rebellion. Like it was done away with completely. That's what it
So
is.
so the reason why it has to be the Jews is here. It was just one example. Is the transgressors is what causes this little horn to come out and do everything he does against God's people and God's sanctuary. It's the transgressors that cause this to happen. It's because they transgressed the covenant and the curses were placed on them, just like during the Babylonian kingdom.
The Jews. They can't be the
The
Jews
Jews. It
because
has to be
the
the Jews.
Jews. No, the Jews did not transgress the law. The
They
Jews
did.
what?
They
No,
constantly broke
Antiochus
the
was not
covenant.
Jewish. Antiochus was from a different kingdom.
No, I'm not saying
Because
this is Antiochus. The
but
transgressors are what caused the little horn to rise.
yes, but the transgressors were not only the Jews. The Jews were not
They weren't.
transgressing because the Jews were not doing that because the Jews knew if they transgressed they would die.
If you
The,
read in First and Second Maccabees, there was tons of Jews who were making covenant with Antiochus the Fourth. They were bringing in this paganism, these gymnasiums, and all these abominations, and they were working with
so
Antiochus to take away the Jewish religion. It's a
so why
fact.
didn't they do that in Babylon?
That is the
Why didn't it
transgression.
start in the why didn't it start in Babylon? Because they did the same thing. Because
They were under the
that's what
curses in
Nebuchadnezzar.
Babylon
Yes, because why do you think they were enslaved in the first place? Because of what they did before.
because they broke the
Judah and
covenant.
Israel, no, because Judah and Israel were already transgressing the law. Literally, that's why they're enslaved. God says, "I'm going to turn you over because of your
That's
sins."
breaking the covenant. That's exactly what breaking the covenant is you
That's breaking the covenant. So why didn't it start then? I mean, that's the whole point. Because in periods, it's always been like
well, it's not going to be the
like it
very
wasn't the only
second you
time.
break one law, the curses are going to be placed on you immediately. God is gracious, but over time they keep
No,
breaking and breaking. Yes,
God
yes.
says no, but God
Yes.
said that if you do not keep the commandments, I will not have you as my people. He says that. He says that
But
before they enter in Canaan.
okay, so when they got to Mount Sinai, how long did it take them to break the covenant?
Literally,
Like 5
hours.
seconds.
Yes, and they
Exactly.
broke it, and
So
guess what happened?
if we're going off of that standard, they would not have been his people the very second they received the covenant.
They're not his people. They're not. That's the whole point I'm trying to tell you.
So they weren't his people back in the
Look
Old
at this.
Covenant
I'll
times.
tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Totally disagree. Totally disagree.
No, Abraham, was he Jewish?
No, he
Was
was
he
not.
Israelite? No, no, Canaanite. Canaanite. He was literally a pagan. Moises. He came from the people of Judah, but he wasn't Jewish. He was Hebrew because Jewish people are from Judah, from Jerusalem, from this area, from Canaan. Jacob was not Jewish. None of these people that God chose were Jewish. God
I'm
can
not
give him
disagreeing
a
with
new
that.
people.
I'm not disagreeing with that. But God
Okay,
specifically
now
says
just continue
what?
what I'm trying to say.
When
Let me finish what I'm trying to say.
go ahead.
Let me finish what I'm trying to say because look at here. people who went out of Egypt with Moses was a mixed multitude. It wasn't just the Israelites, it was people enslaved in Egypt who ran away. It was people, that's why they had so many problems with false gods, because it was a mixed multitude, says in Deuteronomy, in Exodus. But the thing is that God can find his own people. He doesn't need the Jews. He doesn't. If they rebel from him, he will send them in captivity. He will punish them. If they don't come back, that's their fault. The whole purpose of the Jewish people were to be a light to other kingdoms. Literally, the light on the hill. They were supposed to do that.
Okay, well,
Now,
it's pretty clear.
Antiochus wasn't the only time when the Jews joined up with the kingdoms or with the king and did something against God. They were already worshiping other gods because the Canaanite religion was already mixed in when they went into Canaan, because they didn't destroy all the Canaanites. That was the problem. So, for example, Babylon, they did the same thing. When Babylon was trying to change their religion, their ideas, many people bowed down. The only people who did not bow down to Babylon, to the statue, was Daniel and his 3 friends. And not just that, other kingdoms, they did the same thing. They did it to Rome as well. I mean, like, it wasn't only Antiochus. The problem with the 2300 evenings and mornings is that was not the only time they transgressed it.
That's not the
Jeremiah
point.
talks
That's not
about
the
it.
point of it. That's
Ezekiel
not the
talks
point of
about
it.
it.
That's not the point of it, though. It doesn't say this is the only time. This is
No, but the
concerning.
2300
This is
evenings and
concerning a
mornings says
specific
it's
time.
in the
This is
future.
concerning. No, this is concerning a specific time that this happens, and it happens to be in the third beast kingdom. It's pretty clear
Yes.
from the text when we look up here in let's see, we'll start at verse 8. The goat becomes exceedingly great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And instead of it, there came up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. That is interpreted for us in verse 23. We'll start at 22, though. As for the horn that was broken, in place of which 4 others arose, 4 kingdoms shall rise from his nation, but not with his power. So the 4 horns are the 4 kingdoms that make up the Greek Empire.
Yes, which were
So at the
the
latter end
generals
of
of
that kingdom,
Alexander.
when the transgressors have reached their limit. So it's at the latter end of the Greek kingdom when these transgressors, whoever you want to say they are, have reached their limit. And the limit refers to what? It refers to the indignation that is God's wrath that is mentioned in verse 19. Okay, when they have reached their limit, this little horn, or this king of boldface, one who understands riddles, arises. That is why it is referring to the third beast kingdom and not the fourth beast kingdom.
But it doesn't. Rome came out of that. Rome was conquering Greece during that time.
That's fine, but this king, this little horn, whatever it is, I don't care what you say it is, whatever it is, it arises at the latter end of the Greek
Yes,
kingdom
but
when
that's
the
part of the
transgressors,
prophecy of the 2300 days.
have reached their limit.
But the prophecy, that's part of the prophecy. It's not the beginning. It's the part of the prophecy.
Well, no, these verses are just recapitulating what was said in
Yes.
verses 3 to 14. So it's just explaining what he saw in symbols. It's explaining
Yes.
clearly.
For the symbols. Yes.
And so this is what it's talking about up in verse 9 and 10. So 22 and 23 was talking what's being spoken of here in verses 9 and 10. Exact same thing. It's just being explained to him.
Okay.
That's why we hold to it being the great kingdom. Whoever this little horn is, it is brought about, it arises because of these transgressors, which again has to happen during the third beast kingdom's time, when whoever those are. If they're not Jews, they must be somebody else, but I don't know who else they'd be
But
that
who
would
else
cause
was
the little horn.
transgressing the law? It was
Who else? I don't
what
know.
people don't understand is the pagans were considered transgressors of the law because they were not following the law. The law was not only held by the Jews. God says that those who don't know the law are not held accountable to the law because they don't know anything about the law, but they're still accountable. Because, for example, the Israelites, when they were going to the desert, God was commanding them to destroy these kingdoms because their judgment was coming past because they were not following the law of God or following the God of the Bible, you know? So the transgressors can be anybody who's transgressing over the law, transgressing over what God has commanded.
Okay,
We
so
keep
these pagans, once they've reached their limit during the third beast kingdom, this king of boldface shall arise. So that means up here, when it talks about transgressors, for example, in verse 12, it says, "And a host will be given to it, will be given over to it." So this host has to be the pagans with the regular burnt offering because of transgression. So this host is not the Jews; it's the pagans.
because
And
look,
this,
it says that because of transgression or the transgressors in 12. It says because the
correct.
little horn casts God's truth to the ground and opposes God's sacred provisions ministered out to sinners. So what do these transgressors do? The transgressors cast down the truth of the law of God. And all the kingdoms were doing that. Babylon did it, Media Persia did it, Greece did it, Rome did it, Antiochus did it. The problem with Antiochus is because his kingdom wasn't great. If we relate chapter 7 to chapter 8, which they are related because chapter 7 talks about the four beasts, the four
Okay,
kingdoms.
so how great was it compared to the other horns? Okay, so
It
the
was
Seleucid
greater.
Empire, right? It was I think it was the greatest of the four horns.
It was the greatest of the same thing as the horn that was in the fourth beast kingdom. It
Right. So
rose
this
out.
so this during the third beast kingdom here, there's four horns that make up the third beast kingdom after the first
Mhm,
king dies, right? Greece does not
mhm.
like, just vanish and go away because the
No,
first
it
king
keeps
died.
going on, and
Correct.
it says that.
So there's four
It
horns. And so which one was the greatest of the four horns during Antiochus's time?
Ptolemy.
N- No, no, because Antiochus the third permanently took Jerusalem and Palestine from Ptolemy.
Mhm.
So he took land from Ptolemy,
So which one
and he
was the
had
most
done on,
powerful?
and he had extended to the east as well too.
So who was the most
So
powerful?
it would have been, I mean, I guess if you want to say Ptolemy and Seleucid are on par, but I think the Seleucid Empire was greater
But the
than Ptolemy.
Seleucid Empire wasn't that strong. It was so small
Among the
because
four, it was. Yes, it was. Yeah,
yes, but I mean like this prophecy is very very limited
two,
because it doesn't even mention the fourth beast in general. But it's
right,
talking
because
about the
it's about a
little
third.
horn that does the same thing the little horn does in the fourth beast. They're both related because they're both related to the 2300-day period, which is in 7 as well. Because if you remember, the fourth beast does that. The horn from the fourth beast. So yeah, it says times, and half a times, which is 2300 days.
That's 1260, not 2300.
No, it's 2300 days.
A time times and a half time, so one, two, and then a half. That's that's not 2300. That's 1260, I believe. I
Let me
learned
see.
that as an SDA. 1260.
Maybe you're correct.
I know it's hard because there's a lot of numbers, and then you can get confused with
Yeah,
the
it's
numbers and get
super
mixed up.
confusing, especially when it's not written as. Told you
Now, the
what you
time
just said.
times and half times is repeated in the New Testament, but the
Hmm.
2300 is not. That is another reason why I would not apply this to future time,
But why don't you apply it to future time?
because two reasons. Well, many, but two reasons. One, the interpretation tells us this referring to the Greek kingdom, and then two, the 2300 time itself is not repeated in the Book of Revelation or the New Testament.
Oh,
That
because it
tells
doesn't
me
need to.
it was fulfilled. Whereas time times half a time, 1260 are repeated, which tells me there is at least some future application to that.
No, because that's futuristic and it's.
Well, prophecy is
Yes.
past, present, and future. I mean, I don't have an issue with that. I'm
Prophecy is
not a
not.
futurist.
Yeah, of course, you're true, right? But I mean, like the whole point of Daniel is that it ends. So right, the whole prophecy is about the kingdoms. It's about who's ruling. Okay, so that's the problem. But it's not futuristic because then you're taking away the period. You're separating the prophecy away from the other. Right? You're
No, this has to do with the
separating them.
third beast kingdom. I'm not
Yeah, it's
separating it
with the
from
third
anything.
king. We're talking about specifically the third beast kingdom
Right.
and who
Yes.
rises out of that.
Not
Now,
right is out is a part of it.
It's a part which rises out of it because it comes out from the other four horns. So it rises out. It rises up in between them. Very similar to the
Right. But
little
doesn't
horn that's in Daniel 7.
but the
The
little
little
horn
horn
Daniel
does the
7
same
doesn't
thing.
become another kingdom. It doesn't become another beast system. The little horn
Actually,
stays
it
within.
becomes another kingdom because that's what the horn represents. It says that in Daniel 7, the horn rises up and it's what? Another king, but it's different than the others.
It's still the fourth beast system.
It's a
It's not a
part
fifth.
out of
It's
the
not a
fourth
fifth
beast
beast.
power. It's out of the beast power. It
No, no,
rises
no.
out of it.
Well, no, that's fine, but
Yes. Yes, because
that doesn't make it a fifth beast kingdom though. It makes it still
I'm
a
not
part of
saying
the
it's a
fourth
fifth
beast.
beast
Right. So the
kingdom.
little
All I'm
horn.
saying is that this is a king.
Right. That's fine. That's fine. But it doesn't make it another beast system. Just as the little horn
I'm
in
not saying it's
chapter 8.
another beast. All I'm saying is that it rises out, becoming a different power. Because you have the fourth beast, which is more powerful than the other kingdoms, right? It destroyed the other kingdoms. The kingdoms were allowed to rule for more time. And then you have the horn that rises out between the other kingdoms or the kings. And then the little horn takes out three of them, destroys three of them, and it speaks blasphemous words.
Yes.
And then the little horn does exactly the same thing. Doesn't talk about taking out the kingdoms, but it does talk about how it's what? Tramples over God, tramples over the holy ones, things like that.
Yep.
But the main problem here is that what you're doing is you're applying the prophecy to the future, which is bad because if you apply it to the future, you're separating the prophecies, and that makes no sense.
Which prophecy? Which
And
prophecy?
that's the reason why I said the prophecy of the time prophecy, the one that you said that I can apply this to the future. I don't know if you're talking about the time and a half because it's spoken of Revelation.
Oh no, no,
Revelation
no.
is a continuation.
Okay, the time times and half the time. So the time times half the times is repeated in the New Testament. So I could see how somebody could apply that beyond the time of Jesus. But the 2300s does not go beyond the time of Jesus. It's not repeated
Yes, it
in the New
does.
Covenant.
It
No,
doesn't have to be
it
repeated
has
in
to
the new
do with
covenant
the
because
sanctuary.
it has to do with
sanctuary.
the sanctuary in heaven, but it doesn't have to do with the sanctuary on earth. That's no problem.
Well,
And that's
that
what
doesn't
I'm
make
trying to
sense.
say.
That doesn't make sense though, because it's during the third beast kingdom, which you would
It
conclude.
doesn't end at the third beast kingdom. It starts at a certain period during the third beast kingdom, and it ends in the future.
Well, no,
Because this prophecy is futuristic.
you'd say the second beast kingdom is when it
It
starts.
starts at the second and third beast. Yes, that's what I'm saying. The 2300 days starts at 457 BC. Who was ruling then? Median Persia. Then after that was Greece. Greece destroyed the Median Persians afterwards. A little bit afterwards. It starts in the beginning of the Greek Empire, and it ended at the end of the practically the end of the Persian Empire.
Right.
And so
I'm not sure how much further we'll probably get with this because I still don't agree with how you're handling verse 13 and 14, saying that it's not a question and an answer given to the question.
the
Where
thing is that you have to understand the language itself.
right, but there have
But
been
you keep saying
thousands
you
and
keep
thousands and thousands and thousands of scholars who do understand the Hebrew language
and
in depth,
thousands of
and
scholars who
even
say otherwise,
no,
who have studied
no,
this
no,
Old
no, no,
Testament.
no,
I
no.
know scholars personally who have studied this and declared that what
Not
it
only
means it is that.
not only thousands of scholars who would not say this is a question or an answer to the question, the 2300 and 2300 has to do with the activity of the little horn. They almost all say that, but the Jews in the first century understood that,
The Jews
and they
understood
understood
that.
Hebrew better than we do, I would say.
Yeah, but they misinterpreted all of the prophecy because they thought Jesus was going to be a Messiah on earth.
Every
Like
Jew
they
did
did.
not misinterpret prophecy.
Yes, yes. All the disciples thought Jesus was going to come back and destroy Rome. Yeah, it's true.
When he opened their minds up to prophecy, they
You
still didn't
remember what
understand,
happened when
or
he
not
was
to prophecy, but to
crucified?
scriptures.
You remember when he was crucified? They all left in humiliation.
So after he rose and he opened their mind up to the scriptures, did they
After they
understand it?
opened it up, after he opened it up, they
Right.
understood. But
Yes.
before, no. And that's my point. That's
That's
what you
fine.
don't
That's fine.
understand. That's what you don't understand. That I mean, I myself am a scholar of theology. I myself am
Uh-huh.
one. You might not believe what I say, and it's fine. But I don't want what I don't want you to do is this is
I know it's
something
probably
that
late for you too, huh?
yes, it's very late. No.
Sound like you're getting
Yeah,
tired. I'm getting a little tired too. But go ahead.
yeah, but yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, it's a big problem, but I don't think any of us is going to agree on 13 and 14 because 13 and 14 is talking about something specific. And the language of the last verse, where it says of the 2300 days, is language that speaks of only the end of the 2300 days. And we have to understand the beginning because if we don't understand the beginning, we're going to make these theories. It's not truly declared in the Bible that it started at Antiochus.
Well,
It's not.
I understand. I have the Darkham books in my library. I understand that the point they make that this 2300 is focused on the ending, but there's more in the text than just the ending, and that's where I
Yeah, and that's
disagree.
why we need to continue in chapter 9 because chapter 9 is the continuation of this chapter because 8 and 9 are from the bigger prophecy of the four beast kingdoms. 8 focuses on the second and third kingdoms. Chapter 9 focuses on the 2300 days, part of the 2300 days, because they're not separate prophecies. They can't be. They can't be separate prophecies because this prophecy is all about Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 of the kingdoms because the Jews wanted to be free, liberated from these kingdoms. They're waiting for the Messiah. And so Daniel 9 talks about the Messiah coming and rescuing them, getting rid of sin and offering. But he doesn't continue afterwards for a while. And it says, it says that the end of that period is the cleansing the sanctuary. I can promise you, but I don't think it's very important because none of us is going to agree. And I don't think it's the point of salvation right now. The main point of salvation that we're supposed to teach, and what I really detest, is that people go and say the Adventist church is teaching a false gospel. No, we're not. Or that we're a
Well,
cult. No, we're not. We're not. This part is not important to the gospel. The importance of the gospel is if we're teaching who Jesus is. Is Jesus God? Is Jesus not God? That's the main point. That's what would distinguish us between being a cult and not a cult. If we have a leader saying he is God, that's a cult. But if we have a church that says, well, we follow this, we believe that the 2300 days ended at 1844, and now Jesus is in the whole heavenly sanctuary, cleansing it, wiping away these sins, things like that, that's not contrary to the gospel. That actually extends the gospel because Christians today are like, oh, well, I'm just waiting for Jesus. If Jesus's ministry ended at the cross, like he did away with sin and offering and there's no sin anymore and we don't have to worry about it anymore, where's Jesus now? That's the whole point. Why is Jesus waiting when he's already saved us? He only has to come back, and he hasn't because he's still working. That's
okay,
the whole
so that so this is what makes Adventism a cult is what the theology that comes from verses 13 and 14.
that doesn't make us a
That's
cult
what it
because
is
if you don't understand what a
because
cult is,
it's adding to the gospel.
no, it's not adding to the
It definitely
gospel.
is. It
It's
definitely
not
is, my
adding
friend.
to the gospel, and I can tell you why. Adding to the gospel does not make you a cult. And I can tell you why, because a cult, you're in a cult. And I can tell you why.
I understand the
Pagan,
general definition, but there's a
yes,
more
the general
strict
but a
definition within
cult
the
today, the
Christian church,
strict
though.
definition of a cult is somebody, and if you look it up, the
I have, yeah,
8
yeah.
distinguishing cultic ideas, we are just a denomination, believes different than you, but doesn't make us a cult. We don't add to the gospel. Adding to the gospel is the good news, which is that there's salvation. We're not saying there's anything added to salvation. Jesus is the only one who can save us. We say that there is a sanctification process, which is true because you can read that in Paul. Paul talks about it all the time, that we need to what? Uh, we follow the law because we love God, not because we can be saved by the law. We say that the law shows us what sin is. If sin doesn't exist, the law doesn't exist. If the law doesn't exist, sin doesn't exist. Therefore, we're sinless if we have no law. And if there is no sin, there is no need of a law, and there is no need of Jesus' sacrifice because he could just do away with the law if he wanted to. That's the whole idea.
Okay,
now
so the
the
adding of the to the gospel is the 1844 investigative judgment.
the
That
investigative
is
judgment
adding to
is
the
not a
gospel.
cultic idea, and it's not adding to the gospel. The investigative judgment makes more sense than you think it does. And I don't know if you studied it correctly and how much you studied, but that you might have lacked a lot on that idea. Because the investigative judgment says that Jesus is in heaven right now doing what? Looking over in probation.
Okay, could you
The
show me
Bible says the Bible
so
says this.
right,
The
I
Bible says
understand the
this, and
investigative
then
judgment, my friend, but what I'm saying,
I
and
don't think you
I
do.
think we might end on this, um, because we've gotten off of Daniel. But what I
We
will
didn't go
say
off on Daniel
is
because I'm going to show you something here.
if you could show me when any of the apostles preached the gospel, if you could show me the investigative judgment in that, then I will take back what I said.
You want me to show you an investigative judgment
When they
with the
give the
disciples?
gospel to people in the Bible. Okay, so in the New Testament, when Paul or any of the apostles are giving the gospel, they're talking about the gospel. Where is this 1844 investigative judgment? It's not there. You and I
Because
both
they
know it's not
focus
there.
on it.
This is
Like
why
the same
in
way as the
Second
disciples didn't
Corinthians,
focus on the Holy Spirit.
no, what that is an excuse. It is
It's
not the
not an
gospel. It
excuse.
is because I could add something
It's
to the
not an
gospel,
excuse
and then I could say,
because
well,
there's a
they
lot
weren't
of things.
focusing on it.
No, 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 no.
Yes.
A lot of the Bible does not focus on a lot of ideas. For example, the Trinity. It gives us an idea of the Trinity, but, and this is why people go off and say the Trinity doesn't exist. It's occultic. It's from Babylon. It's from Satan, because they go and they say, oh, well, the word's not there. Of course, the idea of the investigative judgment is a new idea, and you're not going to
Thank
find
you.
the
Yes.
wording of it.
Yep.
But so is all the doctrines. The doctrine of once saved, always saved, not biblical. The rapture is
That's not
not
adding the
biblical.
gospel. None of those are adding the
No,
gospel. No,
it
they're not adding
does
the
add to the
no,
gospel,
no, they're
because
not
what
part
it's
of the
saying to the
gospel, though.
gospel, no, what it says in the gospel is this. It says that once you go to Jesus, you can't lose your salvation. That's part of the gospel. A lot of things are the part of the gospel. We're not adding to the gospel. We're extending things that is in the Bible. If you don't believe it, okay, but that doesn't make us cultic, because we're not adding to the gospel. Adding to the gospel is saying that I can save myself. Oh, I don't need
Well, that's what
Jesus.
happens in the investigative judgment.
No, the
Yes, at
investigative
the
judgment does not say that we don't need Jesus. The
no,
investigative
no, no.
judgment says there's two
I'm not
forms
saying
of judgment, two
I'm not
forms of
saying that. I'm not saying
is
that. But what I
sanctification and
mean,
justification. Sanctification
my,
says that we need to what?
right, my friend, I
That we
understand.
need to live righteous, which
But
is
what
in
happens?
James.
Okay, what
It's in
happens
James.
after you've accepted God by grace through faith and you walk through your sanctification process? What happens at the end if you're judged by your works of the law and you are either condemned or you're
The
saved
investigative judge
by
does
those
not
works?
the investigative judgment does not say that. The
Okay.
investigative judgment says that you have two ideas: sanctification and justification. Sanctification is in James. James says this is religion. James 1:27. James 1:27 literally tells us, what does it tell us? Look at that. James 1:27, it says,
Are you asking me?
religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep one's self unstained from the world, meaning sinless. Christ came as our example to keep the law. We can keep the law not for salvation.
We've already
It's
parted ways
to,
because you have not been able to keep yourself sinless. You're only seen
you can
sinless
with
when you're in
God. It says
Christ.
that, no, it says, God says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Paul says, all because we're under grace, does that mean that we do not keep the commandments? It says, no, surely no, because the law is what? It shows us what righteousness is. Therefore, even Paul says it. Paul says that we need the law to show us what sin is. If sin doesn't exist, if the law doesn't exist, what is the point? What is the point of Jesus coming and trying to save us if he can just change the law? He can't change his law. He can't. It lives forever. His
Okay,
law is what defines what sin is.
his law has changed.
No, it has not
I'm not
changed.
saying morality. What you're defining as the law is only the Decalogue. God
No,
has
no, no.
had
I'm
many
talking about
laws.
all laws. If the law has changed, that means
Yes.
you can be gay. If the law has
No,
changed, you can be
no,
transgender.
no,
If the law has
no.
changed, if the law of Moses has changed, no, listen, the
No.
law of Moses has changed. Let me tell you what. That means that you can have sex with your sister, you can have sex with your mom, you can have sex with anybody who's a part of your family. That's what it means.
No, it does
If the
not.
law has changed, that means all the law has changed. We don't need to keep it. We're not held by the regulations. What is the point of not having sex with my sister? What's the point?
I never said morality disappeared and vanished in the
All of
gender,
it is the
and
law
we're
of
all immoral.
morality. The
We're
law,
all
that's
immoral.
all the
No,
law. That's all the law. That's
there
what I'm
are.
telling you. The only law that was done away with, according to Daniel, was the law of what? Sacrifice and
Oh.
ceremonies. It wasn't
Okay,
the other laws
so
of
then
Moses.
by definition, the law changed. Even if we disagree on certain aspects, the law changed by definition.
No, it did not change by definition. It's been the
It
same thing.
did. It did.
No,
It was
Jesus says,
fulfilled. It was
what does
made
the law
opposite.
and prophet say? The law and prophet says that we need to love
Okay.
God with all our heart and we need to love our neighbor with all our, as we love ourselves. And that's in the Old Testament. Everything that the
But
disciples were
Hebrews
reading,
chapter 7, verse 12, it says, "For when there is a change in the priesthood, there is necessarily a change in the law as well." There are
but
changes in
what
the
law is
law.
it talking about? It's
Morality
talking
does not listen. Morality does not change. I'm not disagreeing with you on that, but there was a change in the law.
the law that
That passage
changed.
just said it. So,
No, the law that
but
changed was the sacrifice
but
and
from here, bud.
ceremony.
Hold on a second. From here, I think we're gonna end it because we've gotten way off the topic of Book of
We
Daniel.
get way
Talking
off the
about the law.
topic because you think that
That's fine.
Adventism is a cult and it's not. It's not a cult.
That's
And,
fine.
and
If it's my fault, that's fine. It's okay.
no, no, it's
But
not
I
just your
think
fault. It's everybody, everybody. Like this is what really makes me mad is because I can call you a cult. I
that's
can say
fine.
that you're in a cult because you deny what the Bible says. You
Okay.
do.
Okay.
You say, no, 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 this is not what the Bible says. I studied theology. I'm
Okay.
a pastor. If
Yeah.
you have a doctor, if you're sick, you go to a doctor. If you need to build your house, you go to an architect. Who do you go to read the Bible, to understand the Bible? You go to a pastor. But if you can't trust a pastor, that means you can't trust a doctor. You can't trust anybody. I mean, I'm not saying this because I was brainwashed. It's because I studied it, generally studied it on my own in seminary. I studied it, but like what you're arguing is the fact that no, this is wrong because this language, because this says this, because this doesn't make sense, because Antiochus, but Antiochus doesn't make sense. I mean, like you're saying a bunch of stuff.
It fits perfectly, and if it's
It
pretty
doesn't fit
clear,
perfectly because
it does,
any
my friend. It
time
does.
after
It does.
Daniel fits perfectly.
No, it does
Anytime.
not. No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
Mm.
Rome fits perfectly there too because they
Rome
did the
could fit
same
here.
thing.
Yes, you're correct
Rome
on that.
actually
Yes,
destroyed the temple.
you're
Rome
absolutely
actually
correct on that,
destroyed the
actually.
temple.
And so what
And
would happen
yes,
is the 2300
Rome
would start
destroyed the temple in
in the
70
first century.
AD. He
Right,
destroyed it.
exactly. And
But
there's early church
Antiochus did
fathers.
not. He defiled it. So it did not end the sacrifices. It did not end
It
the
doesn't
temple
have to
for
be
good.
utterly, completely destroyed in this
Yes, it
prophecy.
does. That's what the language is
But
expressing.
listen. It could fit in the fourth beast kingdom, and if it does, it still does not change the fact that the 2300 is what concerns the regular burnt
Yes.
offering and the transgression that
But
makes
it
desolate.
doesn't
And that's a point
start.
where we're
That
not going to
doesn't
agree.
start at it. That
Listen,
doesn't start it.
I understand that's not a point we're going to agree on, though.
I know we're not because
That's the main issue
honestly,
right there.
no, it is an issue. But it's because the reason why we're not going to agree on it because we're not really reading the Bible like we should read it. You're focusing on an idea which is not even a part of salvation. It's not. It has a part of salvation in Daniel 9, but it's not a part of salvation because we have the the high priest we need for salvation. The whole point we need to be teaching is that Jesus died for us. He is our king, he's our Lord, he's our God, and that's the one thing we need to agree on. But you focusing, which is really hurtful, is that you, like everybody else, is always going against the Adventist church, like always going against it. But you guys don't focus on other churches. Like you don't focus on the Pentecostals, you don't focus on the Baptists, you guys don't focus on anybody else, just attacking the Adventist church.
Actually,
And that's
I
not
got
very Christian. That's not
I
very
gotta
Christian.
correct that because the majority of apologists focus mainly on Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses,
Yes.
and
But
one
then
and
they started
Pentecostals.
focusing on Adventists because they lump us together with Mormons and
So
Jehovah Witnesses.
decades and decades and decades,
Yes.
Adventism was never focused on by almost nobody.
No, but now is what I'm talking
That's
about.
fine.
A lot of them are focusing on it, and it's not apologetics. It's really not real apologetics.
Okay.
Apologetics is arguing your faith. It's fighting for your faith, not talking bad against other faiths. You shouldn't go out and do that because that's not what God calls us to do. God calls us
That
to do what?
it's a part of spiritual warfare.
No,
Yes,
we
it
should
is.
be
Yes, it
focusing
is.
on no. We should not be focusing on attacking other Christians. We should be focusing on keeping ourselves right from the world and saving ourselves. We have to focus on salvation. We can't focus on other worlds because if you do that, you're going to lose your focus on God. That's what Satan wants. Satan wants you to focus on that because once you're arguing about Adventists or you're focusing on Mormons and you're focused on Jehovah's Witnesses, what's going to happen? You're going to go and you're going to argue and you're going to fight, and then you're going to be like, oh, well, what's the point of this anyways?
I
That's the
told
whole point.
I
Apologetics is,
totally disagree with you, my
you
friend.
may
I totally
disagree,
disagree.
but that's wrong. This is the reason why I didn't study apologetics because I know it's not the right way. Paul tried to do it in a form and he knew it wasn't the right way. The only way he could reach people was by preaching Jesus. He didn't go around preaching that, oh, look at the Jews. No, he's like, no, we need Jesus.
He did
You don't need
both.
to be like this.
He did
No,
both.
he
He didn't do
stopped
one
doing it.
exclusion of the other.
He stopped doing it. He even said it. He's like, oh, this isn't working. I can't argue with them anymore. I need to
Well,
talk
of
about
course,
Jesus.
he moved on from that group and went and talked to other groups.
Yeah, he talked to other
Apologetics
groups.
is crucial to when you talk with other groups that disagree with you.
No, no, no,
You
no.
have to you have to
You
perform apologetics.
no, no, no. Apologetics. You
Second
do not need to
Corinthians
form it.
Second Corinthians
You,
chapter 10 verse 3. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the
flesh.
weapons of our war are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion
No, we're
raised
not
against the knowledge
called
of
to
God, and to
argue.
take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to
No,
punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. That is spiritual warfare, my friend.
but we're not called
That's what
to
all Christians should do.
argue. We're not called to argue. Jesus didn't even argue. Jesus did not argue. When Jesus was on earth, what did he do? He lived his life according to what God wanted. He did not argue with them. He did not fight with them. He said something that was genuine and they let go. He didn't argue. We should not use apologetics and we should not argue about other religions. If the Mormons don't believe in God, if the Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in God, let them. Your main focus is to show people who Jesus is, not to argue with them. And that's the problem. And that's the problem I have. Is that this is why I agreed to do this because I wanted to talk about the Bible, but I know that I'm not going to convince you. I'm not even trying to convince you. I'm trying to show you what the text says. And if you don't agree with it, that's fine. My point is not to show you which point is right. My point is to show you Jesus. And the point I was showing you is that Jesus is all in Daniel, and
Did you
it leads up to Jesus in Daniel 12.
did you conclude that I have not seen Jesus before this conversation?
I never said that. I
Okay.
said that that's my point to show you Jesus.
Yeah.
Like when I talk to somebody, I'm supposed to show Jesus in everything I do. I don't agree with your tactics because it's not going to help. You're not going to convince anybody to believe you. You're not. In apologetics, you won't.
No,
Nobody's going to believe it.
there's a difference between reaching an unconverted person. You don't go and start slamming them with apologetics. That's not what I'm
No,
saying.
you talk to them about
When
the beginning of
somebody who
Jesus.
professes to believe in Christ but has beliefs that are anathema, that's when you perform apologetics. And
But how do
I
you
will
go about knowing which
s-
ideas are wrong? Because you
s-
don't know if your ideas are wrong or not. You
right,
don't know.
because
You
truth.
believe it's right. You believe it's right because that's what you believe.
So how do we determine truth as objective then? According to
Subjective
that
truth?
statement, if
No,
everybody's
not
beliefs are
subjective truth.
subjective,
Objective truth.
then how do we
Objective truth is what we
determine
need to look.
objective truth?
Okay, to find objective truth,
And
you need.
real quick, I'll let you end on this. I'll let you have the last word on this, and then I'll probably uh, end it with our discussion. And I might talk for a little bit afterwards, and then I'll end the stream.
Okay, that's fine.
But I do appreciate you coming on and talking with me for a second time. I know your time is very valuable, and I know it's very late there, so I definitely appreciate that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh no. Anyways, so The way we can go about it is making disciples. If you prophecy is important to understand what's going to happen in the future, but the main focus is making disciples, people who follow Jesus. It's the main thing we're supposed to do. That's the Great Commission that Jesus left for his disciples. Make disciples, meaning that they were supposed to go and preach the gospel to the world. Adventists do not add to the gospel. We extend the gospel in the sense of we don't add to it, where we believe that God is not just in heaven sitting down waiting for us to die. We believe that Jesus is up there interceding, like the Bible says, interceding on our behalf before the Father. That's what the investigative judgment is. It's giving us time to return to Jesus. That's the investigative judgment for us. There is 2 points in justification, sanctification, which the Bible tells us that we need to be sanctified. We have to follow through. We have to live righteously. So if we don't follow, the Bible says that homosexuals, murderers, adulterers, they don't inherit heaven. Why not? Because they're not righteous. So that's because they live that way, because they were not living the correct way, means that they won't inherit Jesus, inherit the kingdom of God. Paul says that. James 1:27 tells us that we need to live unblemished from the world, which is a form of sanctification. Doesn't mean that we're saved by our sanctification. It's a process to change our hearts, because God is trying to change our hearts, and the only way to be sanctified is through Jesus, to follow his law. Now, we make disciples because disciples is the way of testification, which the Bible tells us that we need to testify to show people who he is. Because once we're living as a disciple of Jesus, we're going to live unblemished from the world. But going and saying this church is a cult, and this church is the true church and all of that, incorrect. Because that's not what Jesus called us to do. That's what the Jews were doing. And that's what they did to the first Christians. They said, no, this is a cult. They're worshiping Jesus. They don't worship God. Let's kill them. Let's persecute them. Okay? So that's not true discipleship. That's not true Christianity. Brothers are not supposed to fight against brothers. We're all Christians. I'm a Christian. And maybe I may believe differently than you, but I believe truly that Jesus is my God. People who don't believe that Jesus is God, that's another problem. I don't go on YouTube. I don't go to other churches and say, look, you guys are false. No, I show them what the Bible says, who Jesus is. Daniel is important to understand the end times, because it tells us in Daniel 12 what's going to happen. After the tribulation, Michael's going to stand up and save his people. It's the end of the prophecy of Daniel 2, which talks about the kingdom that's going to come. And it's the end that we're waiting for. And I know people on this stream is not gonna believe me. They think I'm gonna be crazy. They're gonna say a lot of terrible things about me. But honestly, the truth is, go ahead, because a true Christian wouldn't do that. If you really want to understand and know what it means to be a Christian, or to be an Adventist, or be a Baptist, you need to talk to them first, and you need to be open-minded about it. But you should never judge them, because judgment is what you do for people. That's what Satan does. Satan wants you to judge other people. They want you to go out and say this and say that and discredit what people say. It's not Christ-like, and Satan is working through people doing that, judging people. You may not agree with me. That's fine. But that's what the Bible says. The Bible does not want us to do that. The Jews were supposed to be a light of the world. The Jews were supposed to be the salt of the earth. They were supposed to bring the living water to people, to show people how to live, to have hope. But if Christians are always arguing and debating and discussing about who's wrong and who's right, we're missing the point, because there's people dying. There's people dying, and they don't have salvation. And you guys are focused in your YouTube arguing. Daniel 9 is the book that is going to be opened in Revelations. It's the book that was sealed and that John continues on to the end time. That's my last thought. Thank you.
Alrighty, Ulrich, thank you again for your time. It was
You're
great
very
talking
welcome.
to you,
Thank you.
even though it got a little heated for a little bit, but it's still, I think, overall very enjoyable for myself. I like talking to you both times, so again, I appreciate that.
Me too. Thank you.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye. All right, so let me see. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna review a couple of points. And he's not wrong. Like on that last part he said, where we should be reaching people more and arguing less. I don't disagree with that. That's an excellent point. Christians definitely need to be go making disciples, no doubt about that. But he's neglecting part of what we're supposed to do. And I read it from 2 Corinthians 11 or 10, excuse me. It is spiritual warfare, destroying these arguments and lofty ideas and opinions against our Lord and our Savior. So there's an imbalance there on his part, but he's not wrong. He's a nice person to talk to. I have no hard feelings against him. I have no issues with him. So with that being said, let's go over some of his points real quick, and then I'll end the stream. Points I don't think were really addressed fully. And here's the crux of the issue is right here. He's saying, due to the Hebrew, the 2300 is not the time for the activity here of the little horn. And I think, I mean, I'm not a scholar in Hebrew, so I mean, I can't argue against him on the Hebrew. But I think those who have understood Hebrew for a millennia have understood this. And yeah, there are modern scholars who may disagree, especially Adventist scholars. But there are a few who have applied the 2300 to years, not in the way that the Adventists do, ending in 1844. They are very few and very far in between. I think there was one guy in the early church, I forget what his name is, that applied the 2300 for years. But the majority of them understood that the 2300 has to do. I mean, it can't get any plainer to me. Like, what translation of English would be proper to explain this question and then this answer? It's almost like what he's saying is that the question is asked, and then the answer is for. It's actually answering more than what the question had, which I don't see that from this text. So, for how long? Okay, so there's the question. For how long is the vision, and this vision is concerning. So this time frame, the how long question, is concerning specifically the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, the giving over the host in the sanctuary to be trampled underfoot. What is that about? Where does that come from? That comes from the activity of the little horn. Okay, and the activity of the little horn is explained here in verse 11. The little horn becomes great, even as great as the prince of hosts, and the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. And the host will be given over to it with the regular burnt offering, because, notice here, I don't think he really answered this question properly. The host be trampled in the sanctuary, and the regular burnt offering is taken away because of transgression. Why would pagans transgressing what he would say is the Decalogue? Why would their transgression of that cause the regular burnt offering to be taken away? The host to be trampled underfoot, which who even is the host in his opinion? If it's not the Jews, is it the pagans? Why would they get trampled for not for doing what? Okay. After it explains this little horn activity, then I heard a holy one speaking. And another Holy One said to this first Holy One that was speaking, and here's the question again, for how long is this vision? The vision concerning, and when he says vision there, it is concerning specifically the activity of the little horn. I think it is inescapable from the text. And the answer, okay, so the one of the Holy One answers and says, for 2300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored. So for 2300 evenings and mornings is how long this vision concerning the regular burnt offering is. Pretty clear, pretty straightforward, right? And then you got verses 20 through 25 that are a recapitulation of verses 3 to 12. So the ram is, we're told who the ram is. We're told who the goat is. So the ram is Medo Persia, the goat is Greece. And we're told who the great horn is. He's the first king, Alexander the Great. Okay, so that follows this sequence right here exactly. You got the ram in verse 4. You got the goat in verse 5. And you got the uh, let's see here. Okay, verse 8. Verse 8 has the first horn. That is the first king. Okay. I get confused going back and forth. Excuse me. Where am I? Oh, okay. Here, I didn't go down far enough. See, so here's the horn from verse 8. The horn that was broken, who's the first king, and not kingdom, but king. In place of this is 4 other kings, 4 kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. Okay, so verse 22 is recapitulating, it's repeating and explaining what these symbols mean. And so it's repeating what? It's repeating verse right here. Verse 8. Then the goat became exceedingly great, but when he was strong, the great horn was broken. Okay, verse 21. Now this starts verse 22. And instead of it, there came up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. So these 4 horns rise up in the 4 winds of heaven. So verse 8 is repeating what verse 22 is talking about. And also verse 4 here, verse 3 and 4 is also talking about the exact same thing that verses 8 and 22 are talking about. It says, a mighty king shall arise, who shall arise with great dominion and do it as he wills. This is the first horn. And as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom, that is the great kingdom, shall be broken and divided. Okay, it's divided, but it's still the third kingdom, the third beast kingdom. It's still Greece. And it's divided, notice, toward the 4 winds of heaven. Okay, so those 4 horns, chapter 8 here, these 4 horns grow in the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of these 4 Greek kingdoms, a little horn arises, it grows. And he grows exceedingly great towards the south and the east. Verse 9 is repeated in verse 23. And at the latter end of their kingdom, notice here, when the transgressors have reached their limit, and he said these were pagan transgressors. Transgressing what? They weren't given the covenant. Real quick. All right, real quick. Oops, wrong button. Excuse me. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. For you, speaking of Israel, for you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. He was denying and rejecting this. for whatever reason. Trying to say there's a mixed multitude, that's not an issue. Foreigners came in and became a part of Israel. Israel was a chosen nation, a chosen people out of all the peoples who are on the face of earth. Okay, they were chosen for a certain reason or reasons. They were given a covenant. They were given laws. And when they transgressed those laws, Deuteronomy chapter 28, when they obeyed, there were blessings, and when they disobeyed, when they broke the covenant, there were curses. Okay, so there are curses and there are blessings with our covenant. And so to transgress, a lot of the times in Scripture, especially in the Old Covenant time, to transgress meant you were breaking that Old Covenant as a Jew or a believer in God if you were a part of the Jewish community or the Israelite community. And you transgressed, and obviously not the second they transgressed. They had forgiveness. They had the sacrifice and all that. But over time, when they continually transgressed and got worse and they did not follow God's way, the curses were placed upon them. That's what this is. There's no reason to verse 12, excuse me. There's no reason to insert pagans transgressing the Decalogue when they weren't given the Decalogue. Okay. Verse 23. So either way, during the Greek kingdom, the kingdom of Greece, at the latter end, when these transgressors have reached their limit, and these transgressors, notice verse 19, he said, behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation. This indignation, it refers to what? The indignation refers to God's wrath on people. For this indignation refers to the appointed time of the end. So whenever this stuff is happening, it's happening at the appointed time of the end, because it refers to God's indignation on these transgressors who have reached their limit. So a question, which I didn't think to ask him because I was getting more tired as we progressed, long work weeks and all that good stuff. But notice here in verse 24 of Daniel 9, 70 weeks are decreed about your people. Who are your people? Is it the pagans? Your holy city. What city is that? Is that any city? All cities? So his people, whoever Ulrich would say that these are, in his holy city, whoever or whatever place he'd say that is, it is to finish the transgression. What transgression is this? Are his people, whoever they are, to finish? To put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, which all this happened in the 1st century AD. And so he does have a point. This prophecy could be applied to the fourth beast system, which I believe it was Clement of Rome or Alexandria or something like that, I forget, who did apply Daniel 8 to the fourth beast kingdom. And it fits pretty well. I don't have an issue with that. But either way, if you place it in the third or the fourth beast kingdom, if you say this horn becomes the fourth beast kingdom, you still have these 2300 starting in the 1st century AD when the sanctuary gets, and actually it would start not the 2300 would not start by the activity of Rome, but it would start by the activity of the Jews in 66 AD, which again would support my position that these transgressors are the Jews. And in verse 9, the transgression, which is spoken of here as well, because of transgression and these transgressors. But either way, if this is the third or fourth beast system, this little horn arises because of these transgressors, and he attacks and destroys mighty men and people who are the saints because of these transgressors. So these people who are the saints, who are they? Maybe he'll say they're people from every uh, pagan nation in the old covenant times. Maybe I don't know what he'd say. I'm not sure. But regardless, this little horn comes about because of the transgressors, and his power shall be great, not by his power, and he shall cause fearful destruction, and shall succeed in what he does, and destroy mighty men and the people who are the saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper under his hand, and in his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he shall destroy many, and he shall even rise up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken, but by no human hand. Now notice here, the vision of the evenings and mornings that has been told is true. So all of this is explaining the evenings and mornings, okay, which is right here. So it's explained and it is true, but seal up the vision, for it refers to many days from now. So from Daniel's time, it refers to many days. It's not going to happen during his time, which is interesting, right? Because Daniel chapter 9, I guess it doesn't happen. They wouldn't say it happens during his time, but it close, not far after his time. But this seems to make it uh, seem like it's not going to happen for a while. So the vision of the evenings and mornings that has been told is true, but seal up the vision, for it refers to many days from now. Now, what they say here in verse 27 is that he did not understand it, but I beg to differ. Verse 27, and I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for some days. Then I rose and went about the king's business, but I was appalled by the vision and did not understand it. So he may not have understood parts of it, but Gabriel came specifically to give him understanding of what he saw here in verses 2 to 12. And Gabriel did not fail in his mission to do so. Notice verse 16. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Uli, and it called, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, O son of man, that the vision is for the time of the end. So what this vision is focused on, what the events that made Daniel sick and appalled, which is the persecution of his people, was to happen many days from now. So either way, even if we say it's not the third kingdom, it's fourth kingdom, this vision is not concerning soon after Daniel's time. It's concerning way after his time. Another point I don't think he really addressed is that the starting point here in Daniel chapter 9 is what? The starting point is the decree to, where am I at? Oh, wrong verse. The starting point in Daniel 9 is the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. And if you read Daniel's prayer, that includes the building of the city, that includes the restoration of the people back to the land, that also includes the building of the sanctuary. Okay, that includes that as all of it. So this prophecy starts with a restoring of the city and the sanctuary. Daniel 8, there is nothing here, nothing about a restoring of the sanctuary. In fact, it's the exact opposite. The whole thing is about what? It's about the sanctuary being overthrown. You cannot have these be the exact same starting point. That makes no sense to say that the earthly sanctuary was being restored and being overthrown at the exact same time. It makes no sense. There's only one reason ultimately why they will not accept that this 2300 has to start with the activity of the little horn. There's only one reason why. And I'm not sure what scholars he was talking about that agree with him outside of Adventism, if there are many or any. But there's only one reason that I can see from Adventist theology that they cannot agree that the 2300 starts with the activity of the little horn and ends when that little horn ends, because of 1844 investigative judgment. Nothing else. There's no other reason or purpose for it, because this is the only time prophecy that can reach far enough into the future. If you apply it at a certain point, it can reach far enough into the future where 1844 happened. It can be a special time in prophecy. Now, for those who are listening and do not know and realize this, William Miller was a Freemason when he created his prophecy time chart. And so if you, like myself, view Freemasonry in a negative light when it comes to spiritual things, spiritual matters, and any time prophecy or time chart that they create, I reject. I'll reject outright. But Adventism accepts a Freemason time chart and defends it. I think that's pretty telling. Yeah, I mean, he was saying they're angels, which is kind of interesting because verses 20 onward is explaining what he saw in verses 3 to 12, right? And so it says here, where is it? Oh, here we go. It explains who the hosts and the what do you say? And the saints were, and it explains them as mighty men and the saints. So, I mean, I'm not aware of any time angels are referred to as saints. Is usually God's people. But it can be kind of I can see if you don't read that explanation down here, I can see how you could read the host, because in the book of Daniel there's a bigger there's behind the scenes activity. There's the demonic forces behind these kings and these empires. So I can see how somebody could say, well, this host uh, that is to be trampled. Um, oh, here we go. The host right here that is. So the little horn grows great even to the host of heaven, and some of the host and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on it. Now stars are referred to as angels in the Old Testament. So I can see how somebody could read this and say it's referring to both God's people and the angels behind the scene. But I, I I think the explanation is all we need to understand that. And the explanation doesn't mention anything about the angels being destroyed or killed or whatever he would say that's referring to. I wonder if Walter Veith knows William Miller was a free. Oh yeah, no joke. Back when I was an SDA, he was one of the main guys I listened to. Not the only one, but I grew up listening to him and Stephen Bohr. And I always found it always bugged me because once I left Adventism, I found out that William Miller was in fact a Freemason, and he was actually a Freemason all the way up until let's see, he started his travels and his preaching after he was convinced of Bible. So basically, his whole Bible study, he was a Freemason, and then he started his travels, and I believe in 1833, and I believe a half a year within his travels of preaching what he discovered, which is the Millerite movement, he ended up leaving the lodge. I have a post on this. I'll tag you, Dustin, in the post, and you can have the information there. But yeah, when he was a Freemason, that's when he studied the Bible and came to his conclusions. So and I never heard a drop of that from Walter Veith. And he always talked bad about Freemasons, which I don't disagree with, but it's interesting. Another point he was making was in Daniel 8, the sanctuary has to be utterly destroyed, completely destroyed. And I'm not sure where he's maybe trampled underfoot is where he's getting that from. I'd be interested to study that more. Let's see what this says real quick. So it just means trampling. I'd have to study the word, see how it's used. So it's not used too many times that I can tell. Let's see. Your covenant with you shall stand, or scourge shall pass through, then you shall be trodden down by it. So yeah, I'd have to study that more to see if that word, because sometimes what I've noticed in Adventism is they'll take a definition or a sense of a word and say that's what it means in the context they're talking about, regardless if the context fits it. Now, it may go either way in this context, but what is clear is that this 2300 has to happen either within the third beast kingdom or the fourth beast kingdom, and it happens with the physical temple. There's nothing here about a spiritual temple. There's no hint at it. The only way it could even refer to a spiritual temple is if we applied it in the fourth beast kingdom, which means it destroyed. Once the earthly sanctuary was destroyed in 70 AD, then the true sanctuary was put to its rightful state. But even then, I'd actually apply that probably to see that. I don't know how that. I don't know how you make sense of that. It just makes so much more sense to refer to the third beast kingdom. And I mean, there's no mention of Rome here because there's no fourth beast system here. It's only Medo Persia and then Greece. So, and then verse 11, chapter 11, we didn't really get into, but chapter 11 goes into detail. So from verse 5 all the way down to verse 21 is the activity of the third beast system, specifically between the kingdom of the north and the south, which would be the Seleucid and the Ptolemaic kingdoms. Then verse 22 is the activity of this right here, from verse 22 all the way down to verse 35, I would say is referring to the activity of the little horn in chapter 8. Right here, all of that. And then verse 36 onward refers to the fourth beast system. So we didn't even get into any of that. That'd be kind of interesting to get into. Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure. I don't recall. I'm not sure if he's correct on that. Like that, he's acting as if that word, what was the word? I started with an M. Let me get to it real quick. He's acting as if this word, and I'm assuming he's referring to this trodden underfoot, this mirmos. If this word, he's almost acting like this word means only physical destruction of the temple or of whatever it's being trampled on. Like it cannot be anything other than that. So that might be a point I have to study a little bit more, see if that is true or not. If that is true, that'll be interesting. See, and then here it says it was overthrown. Here it says, or stamped upon. So different word. Oh no, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, different word, shalak. This one also refers to the sanctuary. So it's using two different words to refer what's going to happen to the sanctuary, which is pretty interesting. To throw, cast, hurl, fling, throw, cast, throw away. To cast, that is cast lots figuratively. To be thrown, to be cast forth, cast down, to be cast metaphorically. So it can refer to both physical or spiritual. So again, I don't think that point stands too much. But I think this stream has been going on long enough. And then you comment, sweet. I wish you would have asked him how to rephrase the question. Oh man, yeah, I should have. Yes. Dang it. I got caught up in the heat of the moment. Ah, dang it. Yeah, okay, yeah. So how would he, I think this is what you're asking, Chris. How would he rephrase this question if it was going to pertain to all of the 2300? So if it says, for how long is a vision concerning the activity of the little horn, like how would the Bible need to word that question for it to be applied to the 2300? Like, how would you rephrase the question if you were just asking about the time for the events? Yeah, exactly. I should ask it. Yeah, man, dang it. He just said a lot, and I wanted to like cover a lot of stuff. So but I should have. That was my bad. Because I mean, he mentioned something about it not saying this is when it starts, which almost like he was applying or seeming to imply that it has to say this is when it starts for it to be applied to the activity of the little horn. Almost seemed like that's what he was saying earlier, and I'm like, it does not have to say that. That's being a little too strict with the text, or a lot too strict. It's almost like he was being too strict in order to uh, say it can't be referring to Antiochus. And his arguments against Antiochus were not that strong. It seems like the strongest points were exceedingly great, which really, you read the context, it's not focused about going towards the south and the east. It's focused on what? Toward the glorious land. That's what it's focused on. And I'd say that's what the exceedingly great is focused on, is this growing towards the host of heaven, trampling the stars in the host, the giving over the regular burnt offering, the becoming great as even as great as the prince of the host, and the sanctuary to be overthrown. That is what that exceedingly great refers to, in my opinion. And the reason why I say that is here in the explanation of verses 3 through 12, you see that exact thing happening. This king of boldface, one who understands riddles, shall arise, and his power shall be great, but not by his own power. That could be referring to the demonic forces behind him. Because remember, in chapter 10, it says what? It says here, is it? Oh, here. Is this it? No. It says the kingdom, or the king of Greece. Okay, here we go. Verse 20. Then he said, do you know why I have come to you? But now I will return. This is the angel talking. I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. Okay, so these are not simply princes, like human princes. These are the demonic entities behind these kingdoms. And so that is what it could be referring to right there in verse 24, not by his own power. He shall cause fearful destruction and shall succeed in what he does. That is exactly what Antiochus did. Fearful destruction. Like if you actually read about what he did to those Jews, and again, I'm going to restate this point. The historians don't know why he was the only one in the Seleucid line who acted that way towards the Jews. And he destroys the saints and mighty men. And by his cunning, he shall make deceit prosper. And he was very cunning. Antiochus IV was very cunning. He did very well with that. He played both sides. He played all sides pretty well. He promised many things to many people, got what he wanted out of it. And in his own mind, he shall become great. That fits him as well, too. Without warning, he shall destroy many. That happened. He went down to Jerusalem and destroyed many. Because this is not referring to just many, but it's referring to the little horn activity refers to not the pagans. It refers to what happens to the Jews, what it refers to. And he shall even rise up against the prince of princes. So that refers to what? That refers to this right here, where he throws truth to the ground, takes away the regular burnt offering, and sanctuary is overthrown. Antiochus did all of that. He overthrew the sanctuary. He stole all the treasures, everything inside the temple, erected his own altar in there to sacrifice pigs. He threw the law to the ground, God's law. He forbade the observance of any religious Sabbath, feast day, fast day, any of them, all of them. He slaughtered anybody who circumcised their child on the 8th day, slaughtered anybody who observed any of the Sabbaths. Okay, if anything, this guy could be a shadow fulfillment of the SDA Sunday law. That's what he could be. He fits that pretty well because that's exactly what he did. And he shall be broken by no human hand. That fits him as well. He died not by any human hand, but by sickness. I think it was tuberculosis. So the explanation, so the point I was making is that this explanation here is focused on the exceedingly great, which is towards the glorious land, not towards the east and the south. I mean, he did that as well too. So let's see. Daniel 11 talks about Antiochus perfectly, even his failure to conquer Rome. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wish I would have mentioned that as well too. I didn't even think to mention that, but I'm getting pretty tired, guys. So I appreciate everyone who listened to this live stream. Hopefully, it was edifying in some way, shape, or form. I know it got a little heated at the middle towards the end because at the end of the day, I mean, I know he's saying that 1844 investigative judgment does not add to the gospel, but it 100% does. I might start having to focus on that a little bit because it definitely does. His response to saying that, well, the apostles didn't preach 1844 investigative judgment because it wasn't their focus is nonsense. It was absolute nonsense. That's like me if I was to add something to the gospel and then say, well, the reason why the apostles didn't focus or didn't talk about it because they didn't focus on it. I mean, who's going to buy that? I definitely would not. I think Paul is pretty clear. Let me see if I can find the verse real quick. No, it's 2 Corinthians. Yeah, okay, here. For if someone comes and proclaims another Jesus than the one we proclaimed, okay, so there you have to have the same Jesus that they proclaimed, or if you receive a different spirit from the one you received, so different spirit from them than them, or if you accept a different gospel from the one you accepted, you put up with it readily enough. So the gospel they gave in the first century that Paul gave is the full gospel. There is no additions or more understanding of it later on. The gospel was full and complete in the first century, and it has not changed for 2,000 years. That is why Adventism is considered a cult within Christendom, because they have a false gospel and a false Christ. The false Christ is obviously, if you've listened to Miles' channel, they definitely, and I've talked to many Adventists back when I was on Facebook and in person, where they do teach the tritheist God, and I grew up learning that. There are three beings that are God, and each one is God. Okay, and I also grew up learning that the Roman Catholic Trinity is the false Trinity, and the SDA Trinity was the true Trinity. Or you even have Adventist churches that will teach what? They will teach a type of Arianism, that Christ is a created being, and he received a higher position later on. Yeah, that's another good point. Yes, if Ellen G. White's Jesus had older brothers, the biblical one does not. So I think it's pretty clear. I know I understand when you get called a cult because it can get you emotional. It is what it is. I have no hard feelings against him getting all riled up about it. So, but anyways, I appreciate everyone listening. Grace and peace to you guys. God bless.